Good evening all and welcome back to Untold Fears. Tonight we descend into the oldest mountains in America, where limestone corridors stretch miles beneath ancient peaks, and the darkness is so complete it has weight. 10 people ventured into Appalachian caves seeking adventure, research, or simply shelter from the world above. What they found in those endless stone chambers defied explanation, shattered their sense of reality, and in some cases, cost them everything. These are not tales of natural danger or mere accidents. These are encounters with something far worse, something that waits in the places where light has never reached and where the echoes of screams can last for centuries. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Untold Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of the Appalachian deep woods, where civilization ends and terror begins. The first time I heard my own voice talk back to me in that cave, it was not repeating what I said. It was finishing my sentence. People always picture the Appalachians as these peaceful green waves of mountains, old and tired, with blue mist sitting in the valleys and church steeples poking through the trees. That is part of it, sure. But what most people never think about is what is under all that rock. Miles of hollow blackness, old show caves that shut down decades ago, mines that closed when the money dried up, and narrow crevices nobody has bothered to map because they are too far out or too dangerous. That is where this happened. Not in some tourist spot with handrails and guided tours, but in a forgotten cave behind an abandoned campground at the far end of a logging road. My name is Michael, and a couple years ago my girlfriend Emma convinced me that exploring one of those lost caves would make great content. She runs a small channel where we used to post hiking and camping videos. It had plateaued, and she thought getting a little edgier might give it a bump. She found this old forum thread about a roadside campground that shut down in the early 2000s after a rock slide wiped out half the sites. Buried in the comments, some local mentioned a small show cave on the property that had been closed long before that. No lights, no signs, just a chained-up entrance somewhere on the back hillside. The idea stuck in her head and would not leave. For weeks, every time we planned a weekend trip, she brought it up. "It is probably nothing," she said. "Just a shallow cave with some old wiring, maybe a few soda cans. But if we document it, if we are literally the only people who have filmed inside it in years, that is a story." I pushed back at first. I had zero interest in getting stuck underground in some rotten timbered tunnel nobody knew we were in, but she was smart about it. She promised we would bring extra lights, spare batteries, backup batteries for the spare batteries. She talked to a local caving group online and made sure she had basic safety rules written down. She even marked the area on a topo map and texted it to her sister with the message, "If we do not text by 8 p.m., call for help. We are somewhere in this radius." We drove out there on a gray October morning, the kind where the sky looks like a low concrete ceiling and the air smells like wet leaves. The old campground gate was still chained but hanging crooked. Easy enough to slip through. Nature had taken most of it back. The bathhouse was just a mold-streaked concrete block covered in vines. The pads where RVs used to park were cracked and full of saplings. It felt wrong before we even got near the cave, like walking through a place that still remembered people too vividly. Emma was buzzing, though, camera already rolling, narrating as we went. "So this is day 3 of our Appalachian Backroads series," she said, voice bright, in a way that felt too loud for the dead silence. "We found this old campground that nature has completely eaten, and if the rumors are true, there is a sealed cave somewhere on that ridge." She pointed up through the trees, past the half-collapsed picnic shelters and rotted-out steps leading to nowhere. Finding the entrance was not easy. The hillside was choked with rhododendron and deadfall, and every few yards we had to stop so Emma could check the screenshot she had saved of a blurry photo from that forum. Finally, After almost an hour of climbing and bushwhacking, we saw it. A low, arched opening in the rock framed with weathered railroad ties. A battered metal sign lay half buried in the dirt nearby. The paint was mostly gone, but you could still make out the words "Cave Tours" and an arrow pointing directly at the hole. The chain across the entrance was still there, but the padlock was not. Rust had eaten through it until someone could pry it open with their bare hands. Emma swung it aside carefully like she expected an alarm to go off. Nothing happened. Just cool, damp air breathing out of the cave, and the faint smell of limestone and something older, like wet concrete and dust that had never seen the sun. "This is it," she whispered, even though there was nobody around to hear us. "First steps in. You ready?" I was not, but I nodded anyway. We strapped on our helmets and clipped on headlamps. Emma had 2 spares around her neck and a big handheld lantern in her pack. I took the rear, one light forward and one angled back to catch anything behind us on camera. It was a stupid little habit from all the horror movies we had watched together, the ones where something always appears right over the protagonist's shoulder. It made us laugh on trail. It did not feel funny here. The entrance tunnel was short, just a few yards of bent-back crawling before it opened into a standing-height passage. You could see where wiring had once been bolted to the ceiling, empty brackets, and frayed insulation clinging to the rock. Old wooden steps led down at a gentle angle. Our footsteps thudded hollowly on them. Every sound felt magnified and then swallowed, like the cave was tasting each noise before it let it fade. "Listen to that echo," Emma said. She clapped her hands, and the sound bounced back, softer but clear. She grinned at me over her shoulder. "Perfect for an intro." "Okay, say something creepy." I rolled my eyes but played along. "Welcome to the last place anyone ever saw Michael alive," I said in my best cheesy narrator voice. "Welcome to the last place anyone ever saw Michael alive," the cave answered. Except it did not repeat it exactly. It said the first part like a normal echo, my voice smeared and distant. But the last word came back clean. "Alive." Like the echo had corrected itself, sharpened that one word to make sure I heard it. Emma stopped mid-step. "Did you hear that?" "We are probably just close to a side chamber," I said, a little too fast. "You know, weird acoustics." She tilted her head, listening. "Say something else." I did not want to, but we were here for footage, and part of me was still trying to write it off as a cool natural effect. So I said the first dumb thing that came to mind. "If anyone is down here with us, knock back." Silence rolled out ahead of us, then faint, a single tap echoed from the dark. Not from the walls, not that scattered soft pop rock makes when it shifts. It was sharp, like knuckles on wood, coming from somewhere farther down the passage. Emma's eyes lit up. "That is insane," she whispered. "Do it again." My scalp prickled under the helmet. Everything in me said we should turn around right then and there, but the camera lens felt like a third person watching us, judging whether we were brave enough to keep going. So I swallowed and raised my voice. "Okay, smart echo," I said, trying to sound like I was joking. "Repeat after me. We should probably leave now." The words bounced off into the dark. What came back was wrong. "We should probably leave," it said in my voice, the timing a little off. Then, overlapping my last word, another phrase stitched itself on, "But you will not." Emma's head whipped toward me. "Did you add a soundboard thing?" she asked. "Tell me you preloaded that. That was your voice." "I did not," I said. My own voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. We stood there on the rotting steps, headlamps cutting cones of pale light into the black. The air felt thicker, like the cave had moved in around us while we were not looking. Emma lifted the camera and pointed it into the dark. "Hello?" she called. "Any old wiring down there making weird feedback? Tour guide ghosts? Rock goblins with a good sense of humor?" Nothing. Just the drip of water somewhere, and the faint hum you start to hear in deep quiet, the one that might just be your own blood in your ears. We keep going for 5 minutes, Emma said finally. If it gets any weirder, we back out. Deal? I did not say yes exactly. I just did not say no fast enough. And the passage widened into a small chamber with a low ceiling and smooth flat floor. Old metal railings ringed the edges, and there was a sagging wooden sign bolted into the rock. Echo Dome, clap for nature's amplifier. Someone had stenciled a cartoon bat in the corner, its paint peeling into ghostly streaks. That explains it, I said, relief rushing in a little too easily. They literally named it Echo Dome. This is probably what you read about in those reviews. Emma nodded, but her jaw was tight. She stepped toward the center of the chamber. Okay, she said. One more test, then we leave. She took a breath and shouted, "What is my name?" Her voice rang off the ceiling, scattering into shreds. For a heartbeat, there was only our breathing and the soft ping of water drops. Then, clear as if someone stood 10 feet away, a voice answered. Emma. It sounded like me. Sort of. The pitch was mine. The rhythm was mine. But there was an edge to it, a little downward curl at the end, like whoever was speaking was amused or hungry. Emma turned to stare at me. You did that. I did not, I said. My mouth had gone dry. I did not say anything. The camera in her hand trembled just enough for the lens to quiver in my light beam. Ask it something, she whispered. Ask it something only you would know. Every instinct in me screamed not to, but some smaller, colder part of my brain wanted to know if it would answer. Wanted to see how far this went. Okay, I said, throat tight. What did my dad call me when he was mad? The question flew up into the dome and cracked apart. For a moment, I thought maybe that had broken whatever was happening, that it would just come back nonsense. Mike, the cave said. Then, after a beat, almost gently, boy. My stomach dropped. That was it. That was what my father had always used when he was past joking, past pretending. Mike, boy, get in here. Mike, boy, what have you done? It was not something I had ever told Emma, not in those exact words. Certainly not something I had said on camera. Stop, I managed. My voice came out thin and strained. We are leaving. Now. Emma did not argue. For once in her life, she just nodded. We turned back toward the way we had come, lights sweeping over the old sign, the railings, the safe narrow passage leading up to the entrance, except it did not feel safe anymore. The dark pressed heavier on our backs, pushing against our shoulder blades like a hand that wanted us to turn around again. Do not run, Emma muttered, more to herself than me. You run. You fall. Just keep walking. Our boots thudded on the wood. Somewhere behind us, the drip of water kept its metronome beat. I counted each step, waiting for the odd chill of air that would tell me we were near the surface. It did not come. After a minute that felt like 5, I glanced past Emma's shoulder, and my chest locked. The passage ahead of us was not climbing anymore. It sloped down. Did we miss a turn? I asked. There is no turn, Emma said, but her voice did not sound certain. It is a straight shot. I filmed the whole way. We stopped, turned around. Echo Dome was gone. No railings, no sign. Just an unbroken tunnel stretching into black both ways, like we were standing in the center of a stone straw. Emma, I said, and it came out as a plea. Before she could answer, the cave did it for her. Emma is scared, it said in my voice, right next to my left ear. I spun so fast my headlamp swung a wild arc. There was no one, nothing but rough stone and the beam of her light cutting through dust motes. Shut up, Emma snapped, though she was shaking. You're not funny. I did not. I'm not talking to you, she said. The cave chuckled. That is the only way I can describe it. A low, breathy sound, almost like air forced through tight lips, rippling along the rock. It came from everywhere at once. Above us, below us, right behind our helmets. I pressed my back into the wall and felt it vibrate. like something big had just dragged a hand along the outside of the mountain. "Stop talking," I whispered. Not sure if I meant her, or me, or whatever else was down there with us. The cave whispered back, softer than before, words tumbling over themselves in my voice and horribly in hers. "Stop talking, stop talking, stop talking," it hissed, speeding up until it was a single blurred sound, then snapped into sudden silence. Emma's breath hitched. "Look at me," she said. I did. Her eyes were wide, the whites showing all around the irises. "What did it say to you?" I asked. She shook her head once, sharp. "We are going to walk," she said. "Pick one direction and walk. If it is just acoustics or panic or some stupid resonance thing, the entrance is not far. It cannot be far. You saw the map." "Which way?" She closed her eyes, turned in a slow circle, then pointed. "That way. We go that way. We do not stop. We do not talk. We keep one hand on the right wall, okay?" I nodded, pressed my gloved palm to the cold stone, and started forward. 1 step, 2, 3. I counted in my head, using the numbers the way climbers use a rope. 10, 20, 50. My calves burned. The tunnel sloped, up, down. I could not tell anymore. My sense of direction had dissolved. At some point the air changed. It tasted less stale, cooler, with the faintest hint of leaf mold and outside. Hope flared in my chest so sharp it hurt. "Do you feel that?" I whispered before I could stop myself. "Yes," Emma said. "Yes," the cave said. We came around a bend, and there it was. The entrance, a low tear of pale light spilling onto the floor. It felt like seeing the ocean after you've been lost in the desert. My legs moved before my brain could catch up. I half ran, half stumbled the last few yards, slamming my shoulder into the rock as I scrambled through the narrow gap and out into cold gray afternoon. I did not realize I was sobbing until my hands hit dead leaves and I tasted salt. Emma crawled out behind me and collapsed on her back, helmet lamp still blazing against the overcast sky. For a long time we just lay there, listening to the wind in the trees and the faint trickle of water down the hillside. Real sounds, honest sounds, no bouncing, no distortion. Finally, Emma sat up and turned to look at the cave mouth. Her face was pale, freckles standing out stark against her skin. "You heard it finish your sentence," she said. "Yes." "It answered your question about your dad." "Yes," she swallowed. "It said something to me, too, back in that chamber." "What?" Her eyes flicked to the entrance, then back to me. "It told me what I was thinking about," she said quietly. "Word for word. A fight we had last year, the thing I almost said to you and did not. Except this time it used my voice and said it out loud." She did not tell me what the words were. She still has not. We argued for a while about the footage. She wanted to keep it, to review the audio to see if the camera had picked anything up. I wanted to delete it all and pretend this trip had never happened. In the end, the decision was made for us. When she tried to play the files back in the car, every clip from inside the cave was nothing but static. No voices, no drip of water, just a low, steady hum that somehow made the speakers vibrate. We never posted that video. The camping series died quiet, buried under new uploads of gear reviews and easy trail walks. Emma still hikes, still films, but we do not go underground anymore. Not even in the safe, pretty show caves with kids in hard hats and guides making bat jokes. Sometimes at night, when the apartment is quiet and the air conditioner is off, I will be lying in bed and think I hear it again. My own voice, soft as breath, repeating a line I have just said in my head, but changing one word at the end. Finishing my sentence in a way that makes my skin crawl. On those nights, I get up, walk to the nearest window, and slide it open. I stand there for a long time, listening to the honest sounds of cars, distant dogs, train horns miles away. I tell myself that as long as I can hear the world answer me back like that, in its own voices, in its own language, I am above ground, because down there, In that forgotten Appalachian cave behind a dead campground, something else is listening. And once it knows how you sound, once it learns your name and the words you never say out loud, it does not just give you your echo back. It gives you something that thinks with your voice. If you grew up in certain parts of the Appalachians, you will hear the same warning over and over. Follow the marked trail and never follow a light. When I was a kid, the story everyone whispered at sleepovers was about the Lantern Man of Briar Hollow. Depending on who told it, he was a dead miner, a bootlegger who never left the hills, or something older that just learned how to look like a man. The details changed, but the core stayed the same. On certain foggy nights, a single lantern light would appear off the road or deep in the hollows, and if you followed it, you did not come back the same. If you came back at all. For most of my life, that was just a spooky story to tell around bonfires. Then, one October, I decided to take an evening cave tour in the very place the legend was born. Briar Hollow is not a town so much as a handful of houses tucked into a fold of the mountains, reachable only by a narrow road that always feels about half a lane too thin. The commercial cave there, Hollow Ridge Caverns, is small compared to the big tourist ones you see on billboards, but the locals treat it like an old friend. School field trips, summer heat wave escapes, church youth groups, everyone has been through it at least once. I had not been back since middle school, but my friend Madison had found a flyer online about a lantern tour experience. No overhead lights, no big groups, just a small number of people, each with a handheld lantern, following a guide through sections of the cave that were usually closed. It will be perfect, she said. Atmospheric, local legend, your granddad's ghost stories, but with actual stalactites. I was not thrilled about the idea of walking around underground by lantern light, but she had that determined gleam in her eye, and I had not seen her this excited about anything that did not involve coffee in months, so I let her book 2 spots. We arrived just before dusk. The parking lot was half full, the air cold enough that our breath showed in pale ghosts. The entrance building was exactly as I remembered it. Low stone walls, a wooden sign with a painted bat that had faded into a gray smudge, and a rack of cheap plastic helmets no one actually needed for the regular tour. Inside, a woman at the front desk checked us in and handed us waiver forms that used phrases like uneven terrain and low-light environment. Our guide, a broad-shouldered guy in his 30s with a thick local accent, gathered the 8 of us in the lobby for a safety rundown. His name was Tyler. He had the easy, half-joking tone of someone who had done this 100 times. No wandering off, he said. No climbing on rocks. If your lantern goes out, raise your hand and I will relight it. If my lantern goes out, we all go out, because either I have messed up or Briar Hollow finally came to collect. A couple people laughed. Madison shot me a grin. As we moved toward the cave entrance, Tyler paused in front of an old framed newspaper clipping on the wall. It showed a black and white photo of a rescue team outside the cave mouth, men in hard hats and heavy coats, lanterns hanging at their sides. Before we go in, he said, there's a local story you should know. Consider it context. I felt my shoulders tighten. Madison leaned in. Back in the 1930s, Tyler continued, this cave was part of a small mining outfit. They did not take the best safety precautions. There was a collapse one winter, bad enough that several men were trapped. According to accounts, they saw a light deeper in the tunnel, brighter than any lamp they had, so they followed it, thinking it was the way out. Rescuers later found their bodies in a dead-end chamber nowhere near the exit, piled like they had just kept walking until the rock stopped them. He let that sink in, then added, after that, folks started talking about the Lantern Man, a light that shows up where no one is, leading people off the mapped route, expanded from the mine to the hollow to the forest to the road. You know how stories travel, but in here, the rule is simple. He shifted the lantern in his hand so the flame bloomed a little brighter, casting sharp shadows on the wall. Do not follow any light that is not mine." With that, he opened the heavy metal door and led us down the concrete ramp into the first chamber. The electric lights were off. Our lanterns cast a warm, flickering glow over the wet rock. Stalactites dripped from the ceiling like teeth. The air was cool and damp, smelling of stone and something faintly metallic. At first, it was almost cozy. The group moved slowly, boots scuffing on the path. Madison stuck close to me, her lantern swinging at her side. Tyler stopped every few minutes to point out formations, tell little stories, how this flowstone looked like bacon, how some kids had once tried to carve their initials into the wall and ended up banned for life. Deeper in, the concrete path gave way to packed clay, a little slick underfoot. Wooden railings lined the narrower passages. Our lanterns made the walls look alive, shadows breathing in and out with every step. About halfway through, as we entered a larger chamber, Tyler halted us and had everyone gather close. "Okay," he said. "We are going to try something. I'm going to turn my lantern down just a bit and have you cup your hands so the light does not carry too far. We will stand quietly for a moment. Listen to the cave. Let your eyes adjust." He dimmed his flame. The chamber shrank to a bubble of amber light around us. Folks shuffled closer. I could hear water dripping somewhere unseen, a slow, steady rhythm. The dark beyond the railings felt thick, velvety. My mind started filling it with shapes. "People used to navigate with just this," Tyler said softly. "Lanterns, weak little beams. Your brain does the rest. It wants to find patterns, figure out what is shadow and what is threat. It will invent things if it has to." Madison squeezed my arm. I could not tell if she was spooked or thrilled, maybe both. And that is when I saw it. A light, far beyond the railing, down a side passage we had not taken. It was small, warm, and steady, like another lantern held at knee height. It did not flicker like ours did when someone moved. It just glowed, constant, a coin of brightness in the dark. I nudged Madison. "Do you see that?" She followed my gaze and sucked in a breath. "That one is not his," she whispered. Tyler was still talking, something about how darkness messes with depth perception. His lantern was tilted toward us. He had not turned to look into the passage. The longer I stared at the distant light, the more wrong it felt. It was not illuminating anything around it. No patch of wall, no glint on wet stone. It just hung there, like a hole punched through the darkness. As I watched, it seemed to move. Not with the gentle sway of a handheld lamp, but with a smooth sliding motion, like it was gliding along the tunnel floor, closer, then farther, then side to side, without ever getting bigger or smaller. "Do not," Madison breathed. I could feel her fingers digging into my sleeve. I realized I had been leaning toward it, my body subtly shifting in that direction. A step here, half a step there, nothing obvious. Just a slow drift. Tyler turned then, his lantern following his gaze. The beam cut across the passage where the other light hung. There was nothing there, just bare, uneven walls and the end of the railing. "Everybody good?" he asked, unaware of the way my heart had started pounding. "We will keep moving. Single file, stay behind me." We followed him through the rest of the chamber. As the group began to snake along the path, Madison and I ended up near the back. The couple behind us moved slowly, absorbed in taking photos. As we rounded a bend, the passage narrowed, and the sound of Tyler's voice faded ahead. Our lanterns cast overlapping pools of light on the clay and rock. I risked a glance over my shoulder. There it was again. The light sat just beyond the last post of the railing, about 20 feet back. Exactly where the bend began. Same warm color, same unnatural stillness. It felt like it was watching us, not from above, like a head, but from somewhere lower, like an eye in the chest of something hunched. "Madison," I said quietly. It moved. She did not look back. "Then do not look at it." Her jaw was set, eyes fixed on the sway of Tyler's lantern ahead. We reached a fork where a small, rougher, side passage branched off from the main route. A wooden barrier blocked it, a "Do Not Enter, Staff Only" sign nailed in the center. Beyond that, the passage dropped away into more darkness. The light was waiting there, closer now, right behind the barrier, almost touching the sign. My lantern's glow faded before it reached it, but somehow I could still see it clearly. It was wrong in a way that did not fit any logic I knew. Like a reflection with no source. For a moment, the rest of the cave seemed to dim. The murmur of the group, the drip of water, the smell of wet stone, all of it receded. There was only that light, and a feeling behind my sternum like a hand had slipped between my ribs and was gently tugging me forward. I took a step toward the barrier without meaning to, then another. "Danny?" Madison's voice was low and sharp. "Stop. I just want to see." The sentence did not feel like mine. It came out of my mouth, but the tone was off, too soft, almost reverent. I heard my own words like they belonged to someone else. Madison grabbed my wrist and yanked me back so hard the lantern jerked in my hand. The flame flickered wildly. "Do not follow any light that is not his," she hissed. "Remember?" As if summoned by her words, Tyler's voice floated back to us from around the bend. "You two all right back there?" "Fine," Madison called. Her grip loosened but did not let go entirely. "Just taking it slow." The light behind the barrier shifted. For the first time, it changed size, contracting slightly, as if narrowing its focus. Then it slid sideways into the deeper dark, leaving behind only a faint afterimage that burned in my vision. We moved on, sticking closer to the group. The rest of the tour passed in a blur of rock formations and half-heard stories. My attention kept snagging on every shadow just beyond the lantern glow, half expecting that warm pinprick of light to appear again. It did not inside the cave. When we finally stepped back through the metal door and into the cold night air, my legs felt unsteady. The sky was full dark now, stars pricking through the thin clouds. The parking lot lights hummed overhead. Madison exhaled hard. "That was not just your brain playing games," she said. "You saw it twice." I nodded, throat too tight to answer. Tyler dismissed the group with a cheerful, "Thanks for coming out," and a reminder to leave reviews online. When most people had drifted to their cars, I walked over to him. "Hey," I said, "on that fork near the middle, the blocked-off tunnel, has anyone ever reported seeing lights down there?" His face changed just a fraction. The easy tour guide smile tightened. "Sometimes people think they see reflections," he said. "Lantern, playing off wet rock. Your eyes make patterns. Happens a lot on low-light tours. But you told us not to follow lights that were not yours," I said. "Is that just for the story? Or—" He studied me for a moment. Whatever he saw in my expression made his shoulders ease, but his eyes stayed serious. "Look," he said quietly. "There are old sections down there, collapses, bad footing. If you step off the path chasing something, you could get hurt, or stuck. The brain fills the dark with whatever it wants. Sometimes that is all it is. And sometimes—" He looked toward the cave entrance, then back at me. "Sometimes people swear there was a lantern in a part of the cave where nobody was," he said. "Old-timers will tell you that is the Lantern Man, still trying to lead folks where they should not go. Me, I just tell people to stay with the group." On the drive home, Madison was quiet. The road wound through the trees, headlights carving tunnels out of the night. Every now and then, I thought I saw a warm, still light off in the woods, hovering just beyond the guardrail. Each time, by the time I blinked and looked again, it was gone. "You were walking toward it," she said finally, "like you did not even notice." "I noticed," I said. "I just did not care." "That is worse," she muttered. We did not talk much else about it after that night, not because we forgot, but because we remembered too clearly. Saying it out loud made it feel like calling something's name. Now, whenever I am driving those back roads and I see a light where there should not be one, a porch with no house, a glow behind trees where no driveway leads. I keep my eyes on the painted lines and my hands on the wheel. I do not slow down. I do not turn my head. And if I ever go back into a cave, I already know the rule I will follow, no matter what shape the darkness takes or what it offers me from down some side passage. If the light does not cast a shadow and does not belong to someone you can touch, it is not meant to guide you out. It is trying to lead you deeper. By the time we smelled the chemicals, it was already too late to pretend we had just come for the stalactites. People imagine cave people as hardcore explorers in full-body suits with fancy helmets and years of training. That is not what we were. I was a college kid with 3 semesters of geology under my belt. Abigail was a criminal justice major who liked true crime podcasts and had an endless appetite for weird places your GPS does not want you to find. We were not professionals. We were just curious, which is almost always where bad stories start. The cave we went into did not have a name on any official map. On paper, the land was part of an old family farm that had been subdivided and half forgotten. Locals called the ridge behind it Bootlegger's Spine because during Prohibition, people supposedly ran liquor through the karst tunnels to avoid checkpoints on the roads. Most of those passages had collapsed or been sealed, but everyone agreed there were still holes in the mountain where you could fall a long way if you were not careful. Abigail found the specific entrance we used on a form that specialized in abandoned infrastructure. Someone had posted grainy photos of a limestone opening high on a slope and claimed it connected to old smuggling routes. The post was years old, and half the comments were people calling it fake. That only made her more determined to find it. We picked an overcast day in late October, parked my truck on a muddy pull-off, and hiked up through bare trees and slick leaves. The ridge loomed ahead, gray and stubborn. The air had that damp, metallic chill that always makes me think of basements and storm drains. "Tell me when this stops being fun," Abigail said, adjusting the straps on her pack. "It stopped being fun when you said the words, 'unmapped cave,'" I said, but I kept walking. We found the entrance about an hour later, tucked into a fold of the rock above an eroded gully. It was smaller than it looked in the pictures, and just a squat oval about chest high, framed by moss and dead ferns. Cold air breathed out of it, smelling of wet stone and something faintly sour. Abigail grinned. "That is a good draft," she said. "Means there is space in there, more than a little tourist crawl." We had helmets, headlamps, gloves, knee pads, and 2 extra lights each. We had told my roommate exactly where we were going and when to call for help if we did not check in. On paper, we were prepared. None of that really covers what it feels like to put your head into a dark hole in the side of a mountain, though. The first 20 yards were a low crawl, hands and knees over cold rock, our packs scraping on the ceiling. My breath sounded too loud in my ears. Then the floor dropped away suddenly into a narrow, steep slope of slick mud, and we half slid down into the first chamber. It was bigger than I expected. Our headlamps cut across a domed space with a ceiling maybe 20 feet high and a floor covered in old breakdown rock. Moisture beaded on the walls, shining in our beams. It smelled like a normal cave at first, earthy, mineral, with a hint of mildew. "See," Abigail said, voice echoing. "Actual room." She moved ahead smoothly, picking her steps as if she'd been doing this all her life. I followed less gracefully, my boots slipping occasionally on the damp stone. We picked our way around columns and flowstone, ducked under a low curtain of stalactites, and found another passage leading deeper. As we went on, the signs of human presence started to appear. Old beer cans wedged into crevices, a rusted lantern that had long since lost its glass, a spray-painted arrow on the wall pointing back the way we came, faded but still visible. "Bootleggers or bored kids?" I asked. "Why not both?" Abigail said. "You know how these stories stack over time. Somebody smuggles whiskey in the 20s, teenagers sneak in with cheap beer in the 80s, and suddenly the whole ridge is haunted. We came to a choke point where the ceiling dropped low over a pile of collapsed rock. A damp, narrow opening led through. It was a tight squeeze, shoulders brushing the walls, helmet scraping. On the other side, the air felt different, still cool but heavier, like the pressure had thickened. That was when we smelled it. At first I thought it was just a stronger whiff of something organic. Then my nose burned, and there was this sharp, industrial tang riding on top of the cave smell. Cleaner. Solvent. The kind of thing you smell in industrial bathrooms or places where the mop water is mixed wrong. "Do you smell that?" I asked, covering my nose with the back of my glove. Abigail paused ahead of me, light sweeping slowly across the walls. "Yeah," she said. "That is not just bat guano. What does it smell like to you?" She was quiet for a moment. "Bleach, maybe, or something like it. Too strong for this deep." Every sensible part of me wanted to turn around right then. Chemicals in an enclosed underground space are not a good sign, but the tunnel dipped and curved just enough that you could not see what was ahead unless you went a few steps farther. Curiosity is a powerful thing when it is up against vague danger and a long crawl back to daylight. We followed the smell. The tunnel widened into a lower, flatter passage. The floor changed too, from rough rock to patches of sticky, dark mud streaked with drag marks. Not footprints exactly, more like something heavy had been pulled along, leaving parallel grooves. Abigail crouched to trace one of the marks with her gloved fingers. "Could be someone hauling gear," she said, but there was no conviction in it. My headlamp picked up something in the mud a few feet away, a scrap of black plastic, half buried. I dug it out carefully. It was the corner of a garbage bag, torn and stiff with dried something. "Gear and trash bags," I said. "Sure." We rounded one more bend and stepped into a chamber that did not look like any natural feature I had seen on my geology field trips. It was roughly oval, with a ceiling low enough that we had to hunch. The floor had been cleared of loose rock, scraped mostly flat. The smell of chemicals was strongest here, layered over something else: iron and rot and old, stale sweat. At the far end of the chamber, propped against the wall, was a sheet of thick plastic stapled to pieces of wood, forming a makeshift barrier. In front of it lay a tangle of things I did not want to recognize at first: coils of rope, duct tape, stained blankets, zip ties, some cut, some still looped. An overturned 5-gallon bucket. Abigail's light drifted slowly over it all and then landed on the thing that made my stomach heave. A mattress. A cheap twin-sized foam mattress darkened in irregular patches. Even in the cold, my nose knew what some of those stains were. "This is not a bootlegger hideout," I said, voice thin. "No," Abigail said softly. "It is not." We stood there for a beat too long, two sets of headlamps staring at a scene our brains were trying to reject. Then training and true crime lectures kicked in for Abigail all at once. "We should not touch anything," she said quickly. "Do not move closer. Do not step over there. Our footprints are already everywhere, but we do not have to make it worse." "There could be someone here," I said. My own voice sounded distant to my ears. "Like, right now." We both fell silent and listened. At first there was nothing but the drip of water somewhere in the darkness and the faint hiss of our own breathing. Then, from beyond the plastic barrier, I thought I heard a sound. Not a voice, not a clear noise, just a subtle shifting, like something heavy settling, or fabric dragged across stone. "Did you hear?" "Yeah," Abigail said. "Back up slowly." We moved in reverse, careful not to slip, headlamps still trained on the plastic. My heart hammered so hard it felt like my chest might crack. Every horror movie I had ever seen had taught me what happens when you stand there too long, waiting for something to come through the curtain. The sound did not repeat. The sheet of plastic stayed still, sagging slightly in the damp air. Who or whatever had used this place could be gone, or close enough that one misstep would bring them to the doorway. Halfway back through the passage, Abigail stopped long enough to pull her phone from her pocket. No signal, of course. The battery icon glowed pale at the top of the screen. "I am recording this," she said, voice low but steady. "Time, location as close as I can estimate, description. If my phone survives and we do not, maybe someone will hear it." I wanted to tell her not to say it like that, but I did not have the words. We crawled back through the choke point, scraped our shoulders on rough stone, and did not really breathe again until we were in the first chamber with its higher ceiling and more honest cave smell. The scramble up the muddy slope to the entrance felt twice as long going out. When my head finally broke into gray daylight and wet leaves, my eyes watered with relief. The world outside looked flat and unreal, like a backdrop. On the hike back to the truck, we did not talk much. Both of us kept glancing over our shoulders, half expecting to see someone or something emerge from the trees below the cave. A truck passed us once on the road, slowed a fraction, then kept going. I memorized the color and dents without meaning to. We drove straight to the nearest sheriff's office. Telling the deputy behind the desk that we had just stumbled into what looked like an underground crime scene felt like reciting someone else's story. He asked the usual questions: whose land, which ridge, how far from the road. At first he looked skeptical, like maybe we had found an old hunting camp and were overreacting. Then Abigail described the mattress, the ropes, the smell. That changed his expression. Within an hour, there were people in uniforms and plain clothes, maps spread out, questions sharpening. They took our boots and gloves for comparison prints. They had us draw a rough map of the cave, mark where the choke point was, where the chamber sat. A search team geared up with proper breathing masks and forensic equipment. For days after, we heard little. Then bits of information started making their way back, in cautious phrases and sidelong looks. There had been blood. A lot of it. On the mattress, the plastic, the floor. Some of it old, some more recent. There were fibers, bits of tape, and clothing. Signs that this had been used more than once. Bones, too. Small fragments at the edges of the chamber, some animal, some not. Tests would take time, they said. Comparisons to missing persons, to any open cases in the area. They asked if we would be willing to give testimony if it came to that. We both said yes, even though my throat went dry at the thought. In the months that followed, news trickled out in careful, sanitized reports. Remains from at least 2 individuals were tentatively identified as people who had vanished along the state highway over the past decade. People with their own lives and families reduced now to case numbers and dental records. The investigators suspected there were more victims than they could match. The cave had been used as a dump site, and maybe as something worse. No one was arrested immediately. There were suspects, names whispered in town, men with trucks, and flexible alibis. But the mountain keeps its secrets well. That ridge had 100 logging roads and hunting trails. Anyone could have known about that entrance. Anyone with enough cruelty and enough familiarity with the dark. The last time I heard from the detective assigned to us, he said, "If you two had not gone in there when you did, who knows how much longer it would have gone on, or how much more evidence would have rotted away." He meant it as comfort. It did not feel like it. I still think about that chemical smell more than anything else. How it clung to the air like a warning. How my brain tried to file it under cleaning supplies when it should have said someone is trying to erase what they did. You walk into these places expecting ghosts and old history, and sometimes what you find is worse because it is so recent, so human. Abigail does not chase forgotten places anymore. She is finishing her degree, talking about going into victim advocacy instead of law enforcement. I dropped my geology minor. Caves are not just rock formations to me now. They are rooms where things can happen without sky or witnesses. When people ask why I do not like Halloween haunted houses or escape rooms set up to look like dungeons, I never tell them the real reason. I just say I do not like enclosed spaces and leave it at that. Because the truth is, somewhere under those Appalachian hills, there are still chambers like the one we found. Maybe not with mattresses and plastic sheets anymore. Maybe the law got to that one in time. But caves make it easy for bad people to think the dark will keep their secrets forever. We proved once that the dark can be forced to give some of them back. I do not know if I am relieved by that or terrified of how many more are still hidden. The first time the lights appeared, I thought someone had left their headlamps on in the cave below us. Most people come to the overlook near Pine Crest for the view, a long sweep of Appalachian ridgeline, the valley spilling out below, the river cutting a silver scar through the trees. It is the sort of place that shows up on postcards and screensavers. The guidebooks talk about the trail, the overlook, the sunrise. They do not mention what you sometimes see under the rock if you stay there long enough after dark. My name is Joshua, and this started as a normal weekend camping trip. Just me and Victoria, 2 small tents, and a plan to get out of cell service long enough to remember what it felt like to be bored. We picked a primitive campground just off a forest road, the kind with a single hand pump for water and a pit toilet leaning at a suspicious angle. The map at the trailhead showed a short, steep path up to an overlook marked with a star and the word view. Somebody had added great for sunsets in faded marker. What the map did not show was the cave directly under that star. Locals call it Hollow Mouth. It is not on any official tourist brochure. The entrance is down a side path off the main trail, a jagged crack in the rock face dripping with ferns. A few battered warning signs are bolted to nearby trees. Unmarked hazards. Enter at your own risk. That sort of legal shrug, but no fence, no locked gate. Just a cold breath of air slipping out of the hillside and a dark hole big enough to swallow a person. We passed it on our way up in the late afternoon. Victoria paused to look. Her head tilted, hair falling forward. "Did you know this was here?" she asked. "No," I said. "And we are not going in," she laughed. "Relax. I like daylight too much to get lost underground." Then, almost as an afterthought, "But we should check it out tomorrow. Just the entrance." That was how things always went with us. I would say no, she would say just a little. And somewhere in the middle we would end up doing something mildly stupid and mostly safe. It had worked out fine so far. We made it to the overlook as the sun was starting to slide down behind the western ridge. The rock ledge jutted out over empty space, a flat platform big enough for few people to sit side by side. We dropped our packs, sat with our legs dangling into nothing, and watched the mountains go from green to gold to a kind of blue-black that made the valley look like a painting. By the time the sun was gone and the first stars appeared, the temperature had dropped enough that I could see my breath. The forest sounds shifted too. Day insects gave way to night ones. Somewhere below, an owl started calling. "We should head back before it gets too dark," I said. "In a minute," Victoria murmured. "Look at that." She was not pointing up at the sky. She was pointing down toward the cliff face below our ledge. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The rock directly under us was just shadow and faint moonlight. Then slowly, a dim bluish glow began to pulse from within the cliff itself, like someone had lit a lantern inside the stone. It was not bright enough to cast shadows, but it was unmistakably there, a hazy pool of light about the size of a car somewhere under our feet. "I do not like that," I said. "It is probably just somebody in the cave," Victoria said. "Headlamps maybe, or some kind of leftover lighting from when this place was commercial decades ago." There were no signs anywhere about tours. No railing, no walkway. Just the unmarked cave mouth we had passed and a bunch of forest. But it was easier to grab onto her explanation than sit with the feeling that the mountain itself was glowing. We watched the light for a few minutes. It brightened, dimmed, then brightened again in a slow, irregular rhythm, like breathing. Every time it flared, I braced for it to resolve into something familiar. A flashlight beam swinging, a lantern bobbing. It never did. It stayed shapeless. Finally, the cold drove us down. We picked our way back to camp by headlamp. The blue afterimage of that glow burned into my vision. That night, as we lay in our sleeping bags listening to coyotes yip far off, Victoria whispered, "If someone was down there, we would have seen their light moving when they came out." "Maybe they are camping in the cave," I suggested. "In October? Without a fire?" She rolled over. "Let us go look tomorrow, in daylight. If it is just some weird mineral thing, I want to know." I did not want to go. But curiosity and the way she said "we" pushed me toward yes again. The next morning dawned gray and chilly. We ate oatmeal that tasted like paste and drank instant coffee that tasted like burnt dirt. By late morning, the fog had lifted enough that the trees stood out in sharp detail against the sky. We packed a small day bag, water, snacks, 2 headlamps, a basic first aid kit. I threw in a spare battery bank and our phones out of habit, even though reception was spotty at best. At the cave entrance, the air was several degrees colder than the forest. It came out in a steady stream smelling of wet rock and something metallic. We stood there for a minute, staring into the darkness. "If we do not go far, it is fine," Victoria said. "We just want to see if there is any sign of artificial light fittings, old wiring, that kind of thing. If last night was just some leftover electrical weirdness, it is better than ghosts." "Those are not the only 2 options," I muttered, but I clicked on my headlamp anyway. The initial passage sloped gently down, the ceiling low enough that we had to hunch. The walls were smooth limestone, beaded with moisture. Our lights picked out small stalactites and a few pale cave crickets clinging to cracks. It looked like every cave photo in my geology textbook, familiar and impersonal. About 50 feet in, the passage opened into a small chamber. The floor was damp but mostly level. There were no signs of recent human activity. No trash, no footprints in the thin film of mud, no graffiti. There was also no wiring, no old fixtures, just rock. "See?" I said. "Nothing. Whatever we saw last night was outside our line of sight. Maybe a car on the road below or..." The lights came on. Not our headlamps. Those stayed steady. This was something else entirely. From somewhere deeper in the cave, a soft bluish glow began to swell. It flowed into the chamber like fog, clinging to the walls, bright enough to wash out the harsh circles from our lamps. It was the same color and intensity as the light we had seen under the overlook, but now it was all around us. The temperature dropped sharply. My breath came out in thick white puffs. The hair on my arms prickled under my jacket. "Turn your light off," Victoria whispered. "That seems like the opposite of what we should do," I said, but she was already clicking her headlamp dark. Against my better judgment, I did the same. For a moment, my vision went black. Then the bluish light resolved enough that I could see Victoria's outline, the curve of the chamber, the slick sheen on the rock. There was no visible source, no bulb, no flame, no crack where daylight might be sneaking in. The glow seemed to come from the stone itself, seeping out of microscopic pores. My ears rang with the silence. Even the drip of water seemed to have stopped. "This is not electricity," Victoria breathed, "and it is not bioluminescence. There is no pattern, no pinpoint sources. It is like ambient." She fumbled for her phone and held it up. The screen stayed black. She pressed the power button again. Nothing. "Battery dead?" I asked. "It was at 80% 10 minutes ago," she said. "Yours?" I pulled mine out. It would not turn on. The little battery bank I had packed showed no lights either, as if everything had been quietly drained. The glow intensified in a slow wave, bright enough now that I could see my own hands clearly. For a heartbeat, the light coalesced into a rough shape on the far wall. An elongated humanoid outline, arms down, head slightly tilted. "Do you see that?" I whispered. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I do." The outline held for maybe 2 seconds, long enough for my brain to say, "That is a person," or something doing a good impression of one. Then the light rippled, broke apart, and the shape vanished. The chamber went back to being a featureless wash of blue. Panic started to edge in around the corners of my vision, not the sharp, flailing kind, but a cold, animal awareness that we were in a place we did not understand, cut off from our usual lifelines. "Okay," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. "We are leaving. Now, lights back on." Our headlamps flickered when we clicked them. For a second, I thought they would not come on at all. Then the beams stabilized, pale yellow cutting through the blue. The strange glow did not disappear in response. It just dimmed a little, as if annoyed. We backed toward the entrance, keeping our lights trained on the floor to avoid slipping. Every few steps, I glanced up, half expecting the outline to reform, closer this time. It did not. The glow followed us for a few yards, pulsing gently, then faded as we reached the narrow passage. By the time we crawled out into daylight, the air outside felt almost hot. Birdsong sounded too loud. My own heartbeat in my ears seemed intrusive. We sat on the ground near the entrance, breathing hard. After a minute, Victoria tried her phone again. It came back to life like nothing had happened, battery percentage unchanged. Mine did too. The battery bank blinked cheerfully when I pressed its button. "Maybe the cold messed with them," I offered weakly. "It was not that cold," she said. "And it was not just the phones. Did you feel anything else?" "Like what?" She swallowed. "Like pressure in your head, right before the lights peaked." I had a subtle ringing behind my eyes, a sense that the space around us had compressed, like being in a plane cabin when the altitude changes. At the time, I had chalked it up to fear. Now I was not so sure. We did not go back in. We hiked up to the overlook again that evening, almost on autopilot, as if drawn there. When the sun went down and the valley slipped into shadow, we both found ourselves staring at the cliff below our feet. The blue glow appeared right on schedule. This time it seemed to flicker in sync with something in my chest. Bright, dim, bright, dim, like a slow, heavy heartbeat. I realized my breathing had unconsciously matched it. "Look away," Victoria said suddenly. Her voice sounded strained. "Joshua, look away." I forced my eyes up toward the sky. The stars were starting to come out, indifferent and sharp. After a few seconds, the connection snapped. When I looked down again, the glow was still there, but it felt more distant, less insistent. Just a strange light where there should not be one, instead of something reaching. We left the next morning. Neither of us said the word haunted. Victoria started reading about piezoelectric effects and radiation pockets and rare mineral luminescence, trying to find a physical explanation that fit. None of the descriptions matched what we had seen exactly. They came close in pieces, enough to muddy the water, not enough to clear it. A month later, she emailed a geology professor she trusted, describing everything except the human-shaped outline. He wrote back with a careful reply about unusual electromagnetic fields in karst systems, natural battery effects, and the way human perception bends in extreme environments. He did not say, "You are imagining things," but it hovered between the lines. The part that stuck with me was at the very end of his message. Whatever the cause, I would strongly advise against further unsupervised exploration of that cavity. There are phenomena we do not fully understand, and caves are unforgiving places for controlled experiments. We have not been back to Pine Crest, but every October, when the air turns sharp and the days shorten, I find myself thinking about that blue light under the mountain. I picture it still pulsing in the dark, whether anyone is there to see it or not. Maybe it is just geology doing something rare and beautiful. Maybe it is something else entirely, something that uses rock and water and buried metal the way nerves use electricity. Whatever it is, it feels old. And sometimes, when I'm lying awake at night and a car's headlights sweep across my ceiling, I catch myself holding my breath, waiting to see if the light will keep moving like normal, or pause for a heartbeat, like it is thinking. So far, it has always moved on. If it ever stops, if it ever hangs there in the corner of the room glowing softly with no source, I think I will know for sure that what we saw in that Appalachian cave was not just the mountain putting on a show, it was the mountain looking back. Most people think the scariest part of cave diving is the darkness. They are wrong. It is the silence after something big moves in the water behind you. I had been diving open water for years before I let myself get talked into caves, lakes, or quarries. The occasional coastal wreck, those were my comfort zones. Solid overhead, clear exits. Then I met Natalie at a dive shop clinic. She was already cave certified, already fluent in that calm, methodical language that technical divers use when describing things that can kill you. It is not about adrenaline, she said once over coffee. It is about going places almost no one has seen. Controlled risk for the sake of seeing what is on the other side of the dark. That was how we ended up standing on the bank of a cold Appalachian spring one October morning, staring at a round, ink-black pool that locals called Devil's Mouth. The water looked bottomless, but we both knew from the charts that the entrance to the cave system started at about 30 feet down, through a rock arch you could not see from the surface. A wisp of fog skimmed the water. The trees around us were already turning, orange, red, brown, reflected upside down in the spring. There was no boat ramp, no dock. Just a muddy shelf where previous divers had slid in, leaving deep heel grooves. Behind us, our guide, a lean man named Rick, with more years underwater than I had on land, checked his clipboard. "Remember," he said, "this is an intro dive. We are not pushing any crazy limits. Mainline to sump 1, through, small air bell, then back. If anyone feels off at any point, we turn. No questions." Natalie nodded, already half in her own head running through the dive plan. I mirrored her gear check, trying to tamp down the nerves fluttering in my stomach. Twin tanks, regulators, lights, reels, backup lights, redundancy stacked on redundancy. Cave diving is unforgiving, the instructors always say. You cannot surface if something goes wrong, so you bring your surface with you. None of the training talked about what to do if you were not alone down there. We descended into the spring in a slow, controlled drop, the cold wrapping around us in layers. The world narrowed to the hiss of my regulator, the soft whoosh of each breath, the circle of my primary light. At 15 feet, the daylight above turned from blue to a dim gray disk. At 30, we passed under the rock arch into the cave. The entrance tunnel was wide, almost comforting. Pale rock walls, a flat silt floor, the guideline running along like a lifeline. We swam in a staggered formation. Rick in front, me in the middle, Natalie as tail, as per plan. Our lights overlapped, making a cone of brightness that barely touched the darkness beyond. As we went deeper, the passage sloped gently down. Depth, time, gas, all numbers ticking in the back of my mind. The water was perfectly still. No current, no silt clouds, just the quiet weight of the earth above us. At around 90 feet, the cave narrowed and the ceiling dipped, the passage morphing into a more confined tube leading towards the first sump, a fully submerged section that connected to an air-filled chamber. I had seen videos of this dive before. I knew intellectually that dozens of people had made this same route and come back fine. It is one thing to know that from your couch. It is another to feel the rock close in on all sides and realize the only way out is behind you, through the same black water that has already swallowed you. I forced my breathing steady. In, out. Small bubbles ticked up against the ceiling, scattering Nathan's light in fractured patterns. The guideline brushed my fingertips as I followed it, my other hand tucked close to my body to avoid stirring up the silt. We were maybe 10 minutes from the sump when the first strange thing happened. A pale flash flicked at the edge of my vision, down and to the left. My brain filed it under fish automatically. Except there are not usually fish this deep in cave systems like this. and certainly not ones that size. I turned my light. The beam cut across empty water and rock. Nothing moved. The silt on the floor lay undisturbed. I told myself it was just a trick of light on my exhaled bubbles, or my own fin tip catching the lamp. I did not signal. I did not want to be the guy who called a turn because he spooked at his shadow. Another 5 minutes, and we reached sump 1. From the diver's perspective, it was not dramatic. Just the ceiling dropping down until it almost met the floor, forming a low, arched tunnel filled with water. Our guideline threaded through. Beyond, I knew, was an air pocket big enough to sit up in, rest, and regroup before the return swim. Rick turned, made the OK sign. I answered, Natalie behind me doing the same, then we ducked under the rock and went through. The sump was tight, but not terrible. I'd been in worse. The real unease came from the way my light seemed to get swallowed faster here, the beam shortening, edges fuzzing. I could see Rick's fins ahead, Natalie's light behind, our little column of humans moving through stone channels carved long before any of us were born. Halfway through, I felt it, a push of water from behind. Not a current, more like the pressure wave you get when something big displaces water nearby. It rolled over my legs and back, subtle but unmistakable. I froze for a fraction of a second. In that pause, my brain ran through possibilities. Rock collapse. No sound, no silt. My own movement. Not that strong. Natalie? She was behind me, but well clear. I flicked my light back. The tunnel behind us was a cylinder of darkness, my beam barely reaching 10 feet before fading into murk. For a moment, I saw nothing. Then the silt on the floor stirred in a gentle bloom, as if something just beyond my light had brushed against it. A pale shape moved at the edge of my vision again, this time lower, near the tunnel floor. An arm, my mind supplied. Too long, jointed wrong, gone before I could pin my beam on it. My heart rate spiked. My regulator breathed loud and harsh in my ears. I had the insane urge to kick hard, to flee, but panic in a sump is how divers die. I forced my fins into slow, controlled strokes following the guideline, eyes flicking back and forth between the route ahead and the darkness behind. Another pressure wave rolled over us, this one stronger, like a tail or limb had swept through the water in a wide arc. Rick's light bobbed slightly as he felt it too. He turned his head, beam cutting past me. Our lights crossed and doubled, stabbing back into the tunnel. For a split second, the combined beams lit up something in the darkness. It was pale. Not white, not exactly, but the color of something that had never seen the sun. It had texture, ridged, almost like the underside of a salamander, scaled but soft. It was as thick around as my thigh, tapering slightly, with jointed segments that implied the rest of it continued past what we could see. Along its side, in the harsh LED glare, tiny dark pits glinted. Eyes, some part of me realized. Too many. Then it snapped out of the light's reach, vanishing into the dark. The silt clouded in its wake, a slow, dirty bloom. Rick's hand shot out, grabbed the guideline with white-knuckled precision, and motioned sharply forward. Move. We did. I do not remember the next 30 seconds in detail. Just the narrow focus on the line under my fingers, the sensation of the tunnel ceiling graze my tank, the weight of water pressing from all sides. At one point, something brushed the fin of my right boot with force enough to twist my ankle. Not a rock. Too flexible, too deliberate. We burst into the air pocket like surfacing from a nightmare. The chamber was small, maybe 10 feet across, with a low ceiling dripping condensation. Our headlamps threw weird shadows on the wet rock. We spat our regulators, gasping cold air that tasted like rubber and minerals. What the hell was that? Natalie's voice cracked in the echoing space. She had her back pressed against the wall, eyes wide above her mask. Rick did not answer immediately. He was counting, lips moving. Time, gas, distance, the math of survival. Something big, he said finally, and curious. We are not staying. Could it be a big eel or something? I asked, grasping for anything known. Or, I do not know, a catfish that got weird. Rick's headlamp beam swung to me. Not at this depth, not in this system, he said. We do not speculate now. We go back. Same route, close formation. If you feel anything on you, you do not thrash. You do not bolt. You stay on the line. What if it is on the line? Natalie asked. Then you share the space, he said. We are visitors. It lives here. The idea of being polite to whatever that was felt absurd, but I understood the logic. You do not pick fights with things adapted to environments that can kill you in 2 minutes. We dropped our regs back in, checked each other quickly, and ducked back under. The swim out felt both longer and shorter than the way in, time stretching and compressing around moments of pure terror. My light swept the tunnel, chasing the bubble line on the ceiling, searching for that pale shape and hoping not to find it. It found us first. About a third of the way back, another surge of water rolled over us, stronger this time, lifting silt in lazy spirals. My beam caught movement ahead, the guideline trembling, not from our touch but from something bumping it. We slowed without meaning to. There, just beyond Rick's fins, the line dipped slightly, then rose as if something heavy had draped over it for a moment and slid off. A pale curve appeared in my beam again, closer now. I saw more of it this time. The surface was slick, beaded with water. Along the top ran a faint ridge, and below that, those dark pits, each the size of a fingernail. Some of them blinked, a subtle flexing of thin membranes. Multi-ocular, my brain supplied from some science article I once read. Many small eyes, each taking in slivers of the world. One of them fixed on my light. I felt it like a physical touch. The thing, whatever it was, did not charge. It did not lunge or wrap. It paced us, gliding along the tunnel wall for several long seconds, matching our speed. Close enough that in some spots, I could have reached out and touched it by extending my arm 2 inches. I did not. Rick angled his body slightly, interposing himself between it and the line, gently tapping the guideline, as if reminding us all, human and otherwise, that this narrow route was the only way any of us were going to get where we needed to go. The pale mass undulated, a ripple traveling down its length. A low vibration thrummed through the water, so deep I felt it more than heard it. My teeth buzzed. Then, with a lazy flick, it peeled away into a side fissure I had not noticed, disappearing so seamlessly into the crack that if I had seen the rock alone, I would have sworn nothing larger than a snake could fit. The silt it stirred drifted behind it, veiling the tunnel in brown clouds. Our lights turned the particles into a blizzard of glittering dust. Zero viz, Rick signaled, touching his mask and sweeping his hand. We were already on the line, hands glued to it. We kept moving, blind but for the faint glow of each other's lights inches from our faces. Sometime later, it could have been 2 minutes or 10, the water cleared enough that I saw the familiar slope upward, the hint of daylight beyond the rock arch. We rolled out of the cave into the spring, the sudden openness making my head spin. Surfacing has never felt so much like being born. We stripped gear on the bank in silence. My hands shook as I unclipped my tanks. My right fin had a gouge in the rubber. 3 parallel tears, like something with claws or teeth, had pressed into it. Rick saw me staring. "Let me see that." He turned the fin over in his hands, fingers tracing the marks. His jaw tightened. "You knew there was something in there," I said. It was not an accusation, more an acknowledgement. "I knew there were stories," he said. "Old-timers talking about the thing in the sump, like it was a joke. You hear that a lot in cave diving. Boogeyman tales to keep rookies cautious. Most of the time, the only monsters are tight ceilings and bad decisions. And this time, he met my eyes. This time, something big lives in that system," he said. "Something that is not in any biology book I have read, and it is smart enough, or uninterested enough, not to attack divers outright. Yet." "Should people keep diving it?" Natalie asked quietly. Rick looked at the spring, at the placid, innocent surface. "They should know," he said. "They should go in with their eyes open. Some will say we imagined it. Others will line up to see if they can spot it. That is how people are. We logged the dive as usual. Depth, time, gas used." The official report from the shop read, "Uneventful intro cave, dive to sump 1. Vis reduced on exit due to silt." Because there is not a standard form field for encountered, unknown, multi-eyed entity, exhibited territorial curiosity. Months have passed. On paper, it is just another dive in my logbook. In my head, it splits my life into before and after. Before, caves were challenging but inert, rock and water, and the ever-present risk of human error. After, every dark tunnel feels like it could be hiding something that evolved down there over centuries, perfectly adapted to the kind of black we treat as an adventure and it treats as home. Natalie has not stopped diving, but she will not do sumps anymore. "Overhead is one thing," she says. "Sharing the space with something that can see in that dark and does not care if we make it out, that is another. For me, the worst part is not the memory of that pale, ridged flank sliding through my light, or the feeling of eyes ticking over me from all sides. It is the realization that if it had wanted to, whatever lives in that Appalachian cave could have blocked the sump completely. One lazy coil of its body, and the only line out would have been sealed by living muscle. We were not in control down there. We never are, not really. We just pretend, with our gear and our plans and our careful training. Something else let us pass. And when I lie awake at night, listening to the hum of the fridge and the distant rush of cars, I sometimes close my eyes and imagine that deep cold water pressing from every side, that soft vibration thudding in my bones. It feels a lot like being weighed and found uninteresting. On paper, the cave we visited that day was the safest kind you can walk into. It had handrails, concrete paths, colored spotlights on the prettiest formations. It had a gift shop up top where you could buy plastic bats and glow-in-the-dark rocks. School buses came here. Families with strollers came here. The brochure used words like accessible and family-friendly. It did not mention what happens when a place that is supposed to be mapped decides to rearrange itself around you. My name is Emma, and I went into that cave with Joshua on a Saturday afternoon in early November. Outside, the mountains were in full color. Red maples, yellow poplars, brown oaks all piled on each other in layers. The parking lot was full of license plates from 3 different states. Kids ran circles around the big carved bear by the entrance. Inside the visitor center, a giant cross-section diagram of the cave system took up one wall. Neat tunnels, labeled chambers, depth markers. Joshua traced the main tourist route with his finger as we waited for our turn to go down. "See," he said, "in one, loop, out, like a museum with worse lighting." "I like museums," I said, "and bad lighting is kind of your thing anyway." He grinned, bumped his shoulder against mine, and for a little while it felt like every other weekend day trip we had ever taken. Something we could put on our socials later, with a caption about getting lost underground LOL. Our tour group was about 15 people, parents, bored teenagers, a retired couple holding hands, us. The guide, a college kid with a name tag that said Lucas, did the usual spiel about not touching formations, sticking with the group, keeping younger kids close. His flashlight beam bounced off the walls as we filed down the concrete ramp into the first chamber. "Welcome to Echo Ridge Caverns," he said. "We will be walking about a mile underground today. The path is well marked and lit. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, just let me know, and we will find you a place to sit while the group moves through." The first part of the tour was almost soothing. Colored lights turned stalactites pink and blue, making the dripstone look like frozen fireworks. A recorded voice in one chamber talked about water dissolving limestone over millions of years. Small plaques gave names to formations: the cathedral, the organ, the frozen waterfall. Joshua kept angling for the best photos. His phone held up, the flash off so the cave's lighting would show. About halfway through, near a section labeled the Fairy Grotto, our group bunched up. Lucas paused to let everyone take pictures. The retired couple asked a question about bats. A little boy pointed at the ceiling and insisted he saw a dragon. That was when I noticed the side passage. It was not dramatic. Just a short, darker tunnel branching off from the main path to the right, maybe 20 feet long, sloping gently down. There was no railing across it, no staff-only sign. Just a low metal bar at the floor level, the kind you could step over without thinking. From where I stood, I could see what looked like the glow of another overhead light at the far end. "Is that part of the tour?" Joshua asked quietly, following my gaze. "Maybe it is where we come back around," I said. "Like a loop." We were close enough to the back of the group that no one was behind us. In front, people were still clustered around the main formation, Lucas talking about soda straws and stalagmites. The side passage yawned, unremarkable and somehow inviting. 2 minutes, Joshua said. "We peek in. If it dead ends, we come back. No big deal." I should have said no. We both knew the rules. Stay with the group, do not wander off. But it was right there. A little unlabeled branch in an otherwise over-labeled place. Harmless, my brain insisted. Just a shortcut. Just a curiosity. "Fine," I said. 2 minutes. We stepped over the low bar. The floor of the side tunnel was rougher than the main path. No concrete, just packed earth and rock. The air felt cooler. Our footsteps sounded different here, less of a hollow slap, more of a dull thud. "See?" Joshua said. "Probably another lookout platform." Halfway in, the noise from the group behind us faded more than it should have. 1 second I could hear Lucas's practiced patter. The next, it was like someone had closed a door on his voice. The air went dead, the way it does when you put your head under a blanket. "Do you hear them?" I asked. Joshua stopped, cocked his head. "Faintly," he said after a moment. "Maybe the sound just bends weird." We reached the end of the passage and stepped out into a different cave. The neat concrete path was gone. So were the railings, the colored spotlights, the plaques. Instead, our phone flashlights, because there were no overheads now, picked out rough stone underfoot, jagged walls, a ceiling sweating condensation. The chamber was bigger than I expected, a tall room disappearing into shadow above our beams. Behind us, where the short tunnel should have led back to the Fairy Grotto, there was only more rock. No lit walkway, no group, no murmur of voices, just the dark mouth of another passage sloping down. For a second, my brain simply refused to process it. It tried to rearrange the input, insisting that if we just took one more step, we would see the handrail again, the familiar rectangle of poured concrete. But there was nothing man-made in sight. "Okay," Joshua said after a long, thin breath. "We probably took some weird jog. There are a lot of passages on that big map upstairs. Maybe this is part of an older tour route, and they turned the lights off to save power." "There is no path," I said. "No wires. Look." He swept his light across the ceiling. There were no cables, no fixtures, just stone and dripping water. My stomach went cold. "We should go back," I said. "Right now, we did not go that far." We turned around together. The tunnel we had just walked through looked different from this side. Narrower, rougher, like a naturally eroded crack instead of a gently cut passage. It went up at a steeper angle than I remembered. The low bar on the floor was gone. We walked anyway, climbing toward where the lights and voices should have been. My boots scraped on uneven rock. A fine mist hung in the air now, catching the beams in tiny glittering specks. After maybe 30 seconds, the tunnel opened into another chamber. Not the Fairy Grotto. Not anything on the brochure. This room was smaller, with a low, arching ceiling and a pool of still, dark water in the center. The air was colder here, the kind of damp that gets into your bones. Maybe we took a side passage, Joshua said, but there was no conviction in it this time. I realized, with a slow creeping dread, that we could no longer hear anything from the tour at all. No voices, no footsteps, no distant hum of electrical lights. Just our breathing and the occasional drip. "Check the time," I said. "How long have we been gone?" He pulled out his phone. The lock screen said we had left the main group less than 3 minutes ago. It felt like 10. "Maybe the rock is dampening sound," he offered weakly. "Maybe we are not where we think we are," I said. We stood there for a few heartbeats, water reflecting our lights in dull, oily patches. Part of me wanted to test the pool, to see how deep it was, to prove that this was just a feature we had not been told about. The rest of me screamed that putting any part of my body into that black water was a bad idea. The cave felt, listening, like a held breath. "Left wall," I said finally, forcing my voice steady. "We pick a direction, keep one hand on the wall, and we do not let go until we see concrete. No more wandering." Joshua nodded too fast. "Left wall." "Got it." We picked the passage that seemed to lead back in the general direction we had come from and started walking, my left hand sliding along cold stone. The texture changed sometimes. Smooth flowstone, rough breakdown, slick patches that made my fingers slip. Our lights threw our shadows, huge and distorted on the walls. After a while, it became hard to tell if we were going uphill or downhill. The slope was subtle, the kind you only notice when your calves start to ache or your lungs feel like they are working harder. Every now and then, Joshua would quietly say the time from his phone, as if announcing it out loud would keep reality anchored. 3:12, 3:14, 3:16. The numbers did not match the stretch of time I felt passing. It was like being in a dream where clocks are suggestions rather than measurements. At one point, far off, we heard something that sounded like a voice, a faint echo of words, distorted. I froze, heart leaping. "Lucas," Joshua called. "Hello?" The echo came again, but it was wrong. The cadence did not match speech. It was more like our own voices bouncing back at us with a delay, chopped and rearranged by distance. "Stop talking," I hissed. "Just walk." We kept going, left hand on the wall, lights pointed down. It became a mantra: wall, step, breath, light. Eventually, how much later, I still could not tell. The wall under my palm changed again. Instead of rough stone, my fingertips hit something unnaturally smooth. Not polished rock, metal. I jerked my hand back on reflex, then forced myself to touch it again. A cold, flat surface, slightly pebbled. I swung my light that way. A railing, shiny aluminum bolted into concrete. "Thank God," Joshua whispered. We followed the railing around a turn, and there it was, the familiar poured pathway, the overhead lights, the exact chamber where we had stepped away. The fairy grotto. Families still clustered around the formation. The little boy still insisting the rock looked like a dragon. Lucas still talking about how long it takes a stalactite to grow 1 inch. We had not lost any time. Joshua checked his phone again, then looked up at the big digital clock mounted discreetly near the ceiling. They matched. The whole detour, the side passages, the cold pool. It had taken 4 minutes. We slipped back into the group as quietly as we could. No one glanced our way. No one seemed to have noticed we were gone. I watched Lucas closely, waiting for him to comment on stray guests, to make a joke about people exploring on their own. He did not. At the end of the tour, when we emerged into the visitor center's bright lights and souvenir shelves, I pulled him aside. "Hey," I said, "that little side tunnel off the fairy grotto. Where does it go?" He frowned. "What side tunnel?" "The one with the low bar," Joshua said, joining in. "On the right side, as you face the big curtain of flowstone." Lucas shook his head slowly. "There is no side tunnel there," he said. "There used to be an old route years back, but the entrance was filled in for safety before I started working here. The only path now is the one we walked. We stepped over it, I insisted. We went in. There was no concrete, no lights. If you left the paved path, he said, his tone tightening, that is a serious safety violation. But I walk that route 3 times a day. There is nowhere you could have gone that would not have had rails or signs. He looked genuinely confused, not like someone covering liability. That scared me more than if he had gotten angry. Later, when we looked at our phones, every photo and video from the tour was there, except for the span of 4 minutes between the first Fairy Grotto shot and the next one from a later chamber. In that gap, our cameras had recorded nothing. No accidental pocket shots, no blurry rocks, just a clean jump. Joshua joked once, weeks afterward, that maybe we had slipped sideways into some maintenance section and our brains just filled in the details. But his laugh sounded thin. I started having dreams where I walked the paved path alone and the side passage was always there. A dark mouth with no bar across it, breathing. We have not been back to Echo Ridge. When people ask why, I say the tour was too crowded, that we prefer wild caves, which is technically true. What I do not say is that I no longer fully trust places with maps on the wall and guides who swear they know every inch, because for 4 minutes, in a brightly lit commercial cavern, we stepped off the route and into a version of that cave that did not match the one printed in the brochure. The rock closed behind us like water. And when it decided to spit us back out, it did so without leaving a mark on anyone else's timeline. Tourist caves make you feel safe because the path is supposed to be fixed. That day taught me that the mountain does not have to honor our roots, no matter how many lights and railings we bolt into its skin. 7. Michael. The day my cousin disappeared, nobody even called it a cave. We called it the Little Tunnel by the River, a dumb nickname for a roadside hole in the rock that every kid in the family treated like a playground. It sat just off a pull-off on a 2-lane Appalachian highway, where the road cut through a cliff and left a narrow shoulder big enough for 3 parked cars, if people were polite. There was a rusty guardrail, a trash barrel chained to a post, and a worn path down to the water where folks fished or let their dogs splash. The tunnel was a shallow opening in the rock wall beside the pull-off, about 4 feet high and maybe 6 across, black in the middle even on bright days. Truckers used it as a landmark. You know, just past the little tunnel, they would say, like it was a mile marker. When I was younger, my uncle would lift me up so I could touch the inside ceiling and feel how cold the stone stayed even in July. It was late October when everything went wrong. The leaves along the ridge were half gone, the ones still hanging on brittle and brown. My mom's side of the family did an annual mini reunion around then, less formal than the big summer cookout. This time we picked that pull-off as a meetup spot because the river was low enough for the kids to play along the bank safely, and there was room to lay out folding tables. I was 14, old enough to be trusted to watch younger cousins, but not old enough to have any say in whether I wanted to. My mom put a hand on my shoulder as she unloaded coolers from the back of the car. "Keep an eye on the little ones," she said, "especially Ben. He gets ideas." Ben was 8 that year, a wiry kid with grass-stained knees and a permanent smear of something on his cheek. Dirt, chocolate, marker. Who knew? He worshipped me in the annoying way younger cousins do, always copying my t-shirts, my hair, my slang 2 weeks too late. That day, he had on a faded superhero hoodie and rubber boots too big for him. He was already bouncing between cars when we pulled up, pointing at the tunnel. "Can we go in?" he asked. "Can we go in now?" My aunt called over, "Stay where we can see you. No going way back in there. It is just for fun, not exploring." Everybody said the same thing about that tunnel. It does not go anywhere. We had all been told that by adults who had poked their heads in and seen nothing but 20 feet of dark and a rock wall. A safe cave. A pretend cave. I believed them. The afternoon settled into that familiar family chaos. Adults clustered around the tables talking about jobs and gas prices and which cousin was applying to what school. kids scattered, some to the riverbank to throw stones, some to the patch of grass behind the cars to play tag. I hovered in between, pretending not to watch Ben as he and two other younger ones took turns running into the tunnel and back out, shrieking just to hear the echo. At first, it was harmless. They would dash in until the daylight dimmed, slap the ceiling, and sprint back out into the sun. From the road, you could still see their silhouettes just inside the opening, bouncing around like little black paper cutouts. Well, at some point, one of the older cousins pulled me into a conversation about video games, and I let my attention drift. It could not have been more than 5 minutes. When I glanced back at the tunnel again, only 2 kids were in front of it, Ben's younger sister and another cousin. Both were standing still now, looking into the darkness. "Where's Ben?" I called. "He went to touch the back," his sister said. "He said we were babies because we would not." I frowned and walked over, my sneakers crunching on gravel. The 2 of them stepped aside automatically, like they expected me to go in and drag him back. It would not be the first time. Inside, the air felt cool and slightly damp, smelling faintly of wet stone and exhaust from the passing trucks. Light from the pull-off spilled in enough that I could see the first 10 feet clearly. Graffiti. Old gum stuck to the wall, the usual. Beyond that, it shaded into gray, then into black. "Ben?" I called. My voice bounced back at me, chopped into pieces. "Okay, you touched the back, very impressive. Come on." Nothing. I went in farther, boots scuffing on uneven stone. 1 step, 2 steps, 5. The light behind me narrowed. The dark ahead seemed to soak up my voice. "Quit it," I said, trying to make my tone light. "If you jump out and scare me, I swear I will throw you in the river." Silence. Then very faint, something that could have been a giggle, or just an echo of my own breath. I kept going. In my memory, the tunnel had always ended quickly, the way a culvert does. You hit a damp stone wall, slap it, go back. But now, as my eyes tried to adjust, there was no clear end. The wall seemed to pinch slightly, then widen. The floor dipped in a shallow curve. The darkness ahead was thick, layered, like fog without air. I stopped walking. Behind me, the rectangle of daylight looked smaller than it should have for the distance I remembered. For a moment, I had the disorienting sense that I was in some hallway too long for the outside world it was attached to, like a building drawn wrong. "Ben," I said again, louder. "Answer me." This time I heard something more distinct. A voice, high and far away, somewhere deeper in the tunnel. "I am here," relief flooded me. I almost laughed. "Okay, come back," I said. "Now, you're not supposed to go that far." A pause, then. "I cannot. It is tight." My relief snapped into cold fear. "How far did you go?" I asked. No answer. "Keep talking so I can find you," I said, trying to wedge the panic back down. "Tell me what you see." Nothing. Only the faint roar of a truck on the road outside, muffled by stone. I took 2 more steps forward, then another. The ceiling felt lower now. I had to duck. When I reached out to steady myself on the wall, my fingers brushed something smooth. Not rock. Not the rough, pitted stone of the tunnel entrance. It was cool and almost slick, like polished concrete or old bone worn down by touch. I yanked my hand back on instinct. Behind me, someone called my name. My mom, from the tone. "Michael, where's Ben?" "I'm getting him," I shouted, my voice cracking. "He is just being stupid." The echo came back strangely delayed. For a second, it sounded like there were 2 of me in there, both yelling my name. Every sensible part of my brain told me to turn around, go back to the mouth, get an adult, get a flashlight, get anything. But there was still that high voice in my memory saying, "I am here," and the image of my 8-year-old cousin wedged somewhere in the dark because he wanted to prove he was brave. I took 1 more step. My foot went down and kept going. The floor dropped away unexpectedly. Not a vertical shaft, but a steep, slick slope of rock falling into darkness. My knee buckled. I grabbed for the wall and found only air. My other leg slid sideways. I hit the ground hard on my hip and started to slide. Pure animal terror shot through me. I clawed at the stone, fingers scraping skin off, boots skidding. Somehow, by brute panic more than skill, I caught a protrusion, a lip of rock, and stopped myself just before I would have gone over the edge of a sharper drop. My headlamp, if I had one, might have shown me what was below. But I'd gone in with nothing but daylight and teenage arrogance. All I could see was a thicker black at the bottom of the slope, like the mouth of something deeper opening under my feet. In that moment, hanging there, toes scrabbling for purchase, I understood something awful. If Ben had come this far and his shorter legs had hit that slope first, he would not have had my reach. He would have slid, faster, farther, maybe over that last edge entirely before he even knew to grab. "Michael!" My mom's voice again, sharper, closer. "Get out of there!" Her shout snapped whatever thin rope I had wrapped around my own fear. I backed up slowly, muscles shaking, until I reached flatter ground. Then I turned and stumbled toward the light, half crouched, palms brushing the walls as if they might disappear. When I burst back into the pull-off, the world seemed too bright, too loud. My mom, my aunt, and 2 uncles were clustered near the tunnel mouth, faces tight. Other cousins stood farther back, eyes wide. "Where is he?" my aunt demanded, grabbing my arm. I heard him," I said, the words tasting wrong. He answered, "But there is a drop, I almost—" "You went in there with no light," one uncle snapped, disbelief shading toward anger. "It does not go anywhere," my mom said, but her voice shook. "It never went anywhere." The rest of that day blurred into sirens and questions. Someone called 911. The sheriff's department came, then search and rescue. They brought proper headlamps, ropes, helmets, radios. They went into the tunnel in teams, carefully, methodically. They found the slope I had nearly fallen down. They marked it, anchored lines, sent people down. They found nothing. No shoe, no hoodie, no scuff marks that could not have been mine from sliding. The drop at the end of the slope turned out to be only about 6 feet before. It leveled out into a lower passage, partially flooded, that narrowed too much for an adult to pass. They sent in a small camera on a cable as far as it would go. Beyond a sharp bend, the rock pinched down to nothing. "It is a blind fissure," one of the rescuers told my family gently. "There is nowhere for a child to go from there." "Except he is not here," my aunt said, voice raw. "He did not walk out, and you are telling me he is not in there. So where did he go?" No one had an answer for that. They searched the riverbanks for days, just in case. They checked the woods in case he had somehow turned around and come out without anyone seeing. They put up flyers in the nearest towns. His school photo blown up until his smile looked too big for his face. They asked me the same questions over and over. "How far in did you go? How long were you gone? Did he say anything else? Are you sure it was his voice?" Those last 2 haunted me, because the more I replayed those few seconds, the less certain I became. In the moment, I'd recognized it instantly. Of course I had. I'd heard that kid's voice call my name 1,000 times. But remembering it later, it was like trying to recall a dream. The tone was right. The words were right. But something in the rhythm was off, just a fraction. Not enough to notice until you held it up alone, without the rest of him attached. "I'm here," it had said. Not, "I am stuck," or "come help," or any of the other dramatic things Ben would have shouted. Just that, like a statement, like a confirmation. Years have passed. Officially, he's listed as a missing child presumed deceased. The little tunnel by the river has a metal grate welded over it now, bars sunk deep into the rock. A new sign warns, "Dangerous. Do not enter." People still pull over to fish, to let their dogs out, to stretch their legs. Most of them do not look twice at the dark space behind the bars. I cannot drive that stretch of highway without my chest tightening. Every time I pass, I look at the grate and think about the moment in the dark when my foot went past where the floor should have been, when the tunnel felt longer on the inside than it had ever looked on the outside. The part that keeps me up at night is not just the possibility that I could have gone over that edge too. It is the question my aunt asked the rescuers, the one no one could answer. If the cave did not go anywhere, and every map, every survey, every expert says it does not, then how can someone be in there and gone at the same time? Sometimes, very late, when I'm hovering on the edge of sleep, I hear a child's voice in my memory say, "I am here," in that odd, flat cadence. And I wonder if, somewhere behind that sealed rock, there's still a space that does not line up right with the world outside. A crack in the mountain, where you can take one extra step and not belong to the same map anymore. If that is true, then the last thing my cousin said might have been exactly right. He was there. He just was not here anymore. If you ever want to ruin caves for yourself permanently, walk into one that has more candle soot than stalactites. By the time we found the chamber people around campus now call the chapel, I already thought I understood what dark crimes meant. I had written papers on serial offenders, watched more documentaries than was probably healthy, and sat through enough lectures in my criminal justice program to know the clinical language for almost any kind of human cruelty. None of it really prepared me for seeing a room carved under the Appalachians that had been built, not by erosion, but by intent, for people to hurt other people in. It started as a geology project, which is the only reason I said yes. Victoria and I were taking an elective on karst landscapes. The professor, one of those old guys who could look at a topographic map and tell you where the ground would be hollow. For our final, he wanted field data from non-commercial cave features. No show caves with railings and gift shops, real rock. He gave us a rough area, a stretch of national forest off a gravel road, dotted with sinkholes, old mine scars, and springs. "You will not be the first to poke around there," he said. "People have been crawling into those hills since before I was born. But there are always pockets nobody has bothered to map." We parked at a small pull-off just past a rusted gate, loaded up with helmets, headlamps, notebooks, flagging tape, and a handheld GPS that would only be useful once we came back to the surface. The air had that late autumn bite, leaves matted in damp layers under our boots. The ridge ahead rose like a sleeping animal, all gray rock and bare branches. The entrance we chose was not dramatic. A shallow depression in the forest floor dropped into a crack big enough to slide through on your stomach. Cold air sighed out, smelling of leaf mold and limestone. Someone had spray-painted a small arrow on a nearby rock, the only sign that other people had found it before us. "You sure this is the one you want?" I asked. "If it has air moving, it has space," Victoria said, "and everything else up here is sinkholes full of trash." We went in feet first, boots scraping, packs catching for a moment on the lip until gravity pulled us down onto a short, muddy slope. The beam of my headlamp wobbled. For a second, everything was loose dirt and sliding motion. Then the slope leveled out, and we were in the first chamber. It was textbook at first. Dome ceiling, breakdown boulders, a little drip of water in one corner. The floor showed scuffed patches where other boots had disturbed the dust. A crumpled energy drink can lay half buried under a rock. Someone had scrawled a date on the wall in charcoal years ago. Ordinary human intrusion, layered over ordinary geology. We did what we were supposed to do, took rough measurements, noted the kinds of formations, marked our route with a bit of flagging tape so we would not get turned around. The passage at the back of the chamber narrowed into a low crawl, then opened into another space a few feet lower. We zigzagged like that for a while. Crawl, squeeze, stand, breathe, until my knees ached and my elbows were slick with clay. Deeper in, the signs of casual visitors thinned. No more cans, no fresh graffiti. The air felt cooler, the quiet heavier. Our voices bounced shorter off the walls. We were about to turn back, our agreed-upon time limit underground creeping up, when we found the notch. It was just a dark slice in the wall at first glance, waist-high and barely wide enough for one person. The air coming out of it was markedly colder than the rest of the cave. When I put my hand near the gap, the skin on my fingers prickled. Victoria lay flat and shined her light inside. "There is more beyond," she said. "Bigger. The floor drops about 3 feet, then levels. I think we can fit." "We do not have to," I said. "We have enough data for the assignment. The prof will be happy if we show up with any GPS coordinates that are not in a souvenir brochure." She hesitated, chewing her lip. 5 minutes, she said. "If it opens into something cool, we get extra credit. If it is just more crawl, we back out. You know he will be thrilled if we find a new chamber." Which was true. And that little tug of discovery pride, the same one that got me into this degree in the first place, pulled harder than my unease. I went first this time, sliding through the notch awkwardly, one arm ahead, pack scraping behind me. For a moment, I was wedged, rock pressing on both shoulders. Then I wriggled free, dropped down onto my hands, and stood up into a space that felt wrong before I even saw all of it. It was the smell that hit me first, not the usual cave mix of damp stone and old organic rot, but something sharper, layered. Old smoke, old sweat, the faint metallic tang of dried blood. Underneath that, faintly, something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. My headlamp cut through the dark. The beam caught the far wall and the black. At first I thought it was shadow. Then I realized the upper half of the chamber was stained. The ceiling and the top portions of the walls were coated in a dense, uneven layer of soot. Thick black swirls climbed up toward the cracks, tapering where the smoke had thinned. "Daniel?" Victoria's voice came muffled through the notch. "What do you see?" "Stay there a second," I said reflexively, even though she was already halfway through. When her light came up beside mine, I heard her suck in a breath. The room was roughly circular, maybe 15 feet across. The floor had been cleared and smoothed, any natural rubble pushed to the sides. At the center, directly under the darkest patch of soot on the ceiling, stood a low, flat-topped boulder. Not a natural pillar. Its edges were too even, its top too level. Around it, on the floor, were chalky white streaks and rings, worn but still visible. It looked like an altar. On the walls, just below the soot line, someone had carved symbols, deep grooves cut into the stone with something sharp and determined. Some were simple, circles, triangles, lines intersecting. Others were more complex, tangled shapes that made my eyes ache if I stared too long, like my brain kept trying and failing to find a pattern. The carvings were old enough that mineral deposits had begun to soften their edges, but not so old that they were unrecognizable. Candles had been wedged into cracks in the rock all around the room. Dozens of them at least, their wax dripped and hardened in thick, stalagmite-like formations down the wall. Most were burned all the way to the nub. Some, disturbingly, looked recent. Plastic-encased votives like you would buy in a dollar store, their wicks blackened but not completely gone. "Okay," Victoria said quietly. "This is not extra credit." Near the base of the central stone, half obscured by shadow, lay a dark stain. It spread irregularly across the floor, soaking into the rock in places. When I moved my light, the color changed from black to a deep, dried brown. You do not take criminal justice classes without seeing enough photos to recognize what old blood looks like. "Do not step there," I said, my voice coming out too sharp. "Stay by the wall. Do not touch anything." She obeyed, pressing closer to the carvings instead. Her light traced one symbol, a spiral intersected by a vertical line, flanked by angular shapes I could not immediately place. "Looks like something out of a true crime blog," she muttered. "You know, the cult section nobody fact-checks." I circled slowly, keeping to the outer edge, my boot soles careful. There were other things scattered near the altar, embedded in wax drippings or half-hidden under stone ledges. A length of rope, fibers stiff and darkened, something that might once have been cloth, crusted and collapsed. the curved bone of some animal, small and yellowed, with cut marks near one end. "This is a crime scene," Victoria said finally, voice low but steady. Or it was, more than once. "We should not be here." I nodded, throat tight. "We back out. We mark the entrance on GPS. We go straight to the ranger station." I paused, "And we do not tell anyone else about this until the right people see it." She started to turn back toward the notch, then froze. "Listen," she whispered. At first, I heard nothing but the usual cave noises, distant water drip, the faint scuff of our own shifting feet. Then, under that, a sound that did not belong here, very faint, very far, the murmur of voices. Not words, not anything I could distinguish, just the cadence of people speaking to each other somewhere beyond the walls, the way you hear a conversation through an apartment wall, tone without content. "They cannot be above us," I said. "We are too deep." Victoria's light flicked off for a second as her hand tensed, then back on. "It is probably just sound carrying from the entrance," she said, "or from another passage." The voices swelled for a moment, then faded, like whoever was speaking had moved away or turned their heads. My skin crawled. I suddenly felt horribly visible, as if stepping into that room had lit a beacon in some shared space we could not see. "We are leaving," I said. "Now." We backed toward the notch together, lights never leaving the central stone. At the very edge of my beam, I saw something on its surface I had missed before, scratched lines that might have been letters, smeared and worn. A name, maybe, or a date. I did not let myself get close enough to read it. Squeezing back through the narrow gap was like being born in reverse. For a few seconds, my chest was pressed between stone, lungs tight, headlamp scraping. When I spilled back into the more ordinary crawlway on the other side, the air, though still cave-stale, felt clean by comparison. We did not speak much on the way out. The tunnel we had taken in seemed longer. Every twist a chance to get turned around. Every shadow a place for those distant voices to solidify into something closer. When we finally reached the slanted entrance in the gray light of afternoon, I had to blink rapidly to adjust, my eyes watering. Above ground, with the wind in the trees and the scent of wet leaves in my nose, the chapel could have been a bad dream. The temptation to treat it as one was strong. We could have gone back to campus, written up our dimensions and formation notes, never mentioned the soot, the altar, the stains. We did not. The ranger at the nearest station listened in the careful, quiet way people do when they're trying to decide how much they believe you. When we mentioned soot, candles, symbols, the way the floor had been cleared, his posture changed. He asked for coordinates, for descriptions, for any photos we had taken. We had none of the last. Neither of us had thought to raise our phones. It was as if some part of our brains had decided that recording it would make it too real. Law enforcement got involved. First local deputies, then investigators from farther out. They went into the cave with proper gear, labeled bags, cameras that did not hesitate. Later, in brief, sanitized updates, we heard that some of the material in that room matched open cases, fibers, DNA, things I did not want detailed. Not all of it did. Some of what went on down there was ritual, one detective said to us in a debriefing. Some of it was cover for other crimes. Sometimes people like to dress up their violence in symbols, make it feel bigger. "Did you find them?" Victoria asked. "The ones who used it." "Some people," he said carefully. "We are still working on who did what." The chapel was sealed off after that. Not filled in, too valuable now as evidence, as a place they might need to go back to, but gated, locked, marked in databases with case numbers. On the surface, where our narrow entrance had been just another scar in the hillside, they put up a small metal sign. "Area closed for public safety." It does not say anything about why. In class, when the topic of cults or ritual crimes comes up, I keep my eyes on my notebook. The examples on slides are always somewhere else, another state, another time. Pretty photos, clean diagrams, The horror filtered through distance. I think about the candle soot smeared thick on the ceiling of that Appalachian chamber, the way it climbed into the cracks like a handprint that stretched upward for years. People talk about caves as neutral places, as geology, as adventure. Before that day, I did too. Now, when someone mentions going underground, my first thought is not about rock formations. It is about how easy it is to build a room under a mountain where no one can hear you chant, or beg, or bleed, and how long it can keep its secrets until two students with notebooks and a class assignment happened to crawl into the wrong space. We were lucky. We walked into a crime scene after the worst of what happened. There was over. Somebody before us needed a room no one would find. The mountain gave it to them. It did not tell us why it finally let us in. People always assumed the last words we heard on the radio were a scream. They were not. They were a joke about how bad the reception was. There were 4 of us in the cave that day. Me, Madison, and 2 guys from an outdoor club who had more gear than sense. It was late November in the Appalachians. The trees stripped bare, the ground slick with wet leaves. We had picked a mapped cave system near an old mining town. Nothing too extreme on paper. Tight squeezes, a few climbs, no technical rope work if you stayed on the known route. The guy who organized it, Tyler, insisted on doing things by the book. That meant redundant headlamps, spare batteries, first aid kits, and cheap handheld radios so we could stay in touch when the passage forced us into single file. "You never know when line of sight will go," he said, wagging the radio like a teacher with a pointer. "Sound bounces weird underground. This cuts through that." I was skeptical. The cave was not that complex, and the radios looked like they had been bought on clearance. But it was hard to argue against more ways to yell for help. We entered mid-morning, our breath fogging in the cold air. The first stretch was all familiar moves. Duck under, step over, squeeze sideways between 2 slabs. Our boots thudded on damp rock. The air smelled of earth and something sharper, that mineral tang caves always have when you get past the first few chambers tourists see. We divided positions based on comfort. Tyler took point with the map, his friend Gary behind him. I followed, and Madison brought up the rear. Each of us clipped a radio to our chest strap, cords looped tight. For the first hour, everything was almost fun. We made dumb jokes, called out formations that looked like things. Hey, that stalagmite is absolutely a melted snowman, and occasionally used the radios just because we could. "How's the view back there?" Madison's voice crackled over my speaker at one point. "All I see is your boots," I said. "You really need new treads." "You volunteered to go in front of me," she replied. "Enjoy the show." Around the second hour, the cave shifted character. The wide, echoing chambers gave way to narrower, twisting passages. The ceiling dropped. Our formations stretched and compressed as we negotiated single-file squeezes. The radio chatter died down naturally as we focused more on not smacking our helmets on low rock. Somewhere in that maze, we lost sight of each other completely. It happened gradually. Tyler moved ahead to scout a junction. Gary followed to help with route finding. Their lights disappeared around a bend. Madison and I waited, our beams idling over damp stone, listening to the drip of water and the faint scratch of our own fidgeting. Then the radio on my chest squawked. "Yeah, we're good," Tyler's voice said, slightly fuzzed. "Left passage is blocked. We're trying the right. You guys hang tight, we'll shout when it opens up." "Copy," I said automatically. "We're maybe 20 feet back. Take your time." There was a brief burst of static like someone breathing on the mic. Then nothing. Madison and I killed our headlamps for a moment just to feel the dark. It was a bad habit, but an old one. You think you're used to it, but there is always that extra second of free fall in your brain when all the light goes away. "Think they actually know where they are going?" she asked. "As long as they know how to get back," I said. We clicked our lights on again. The passage ahead remained empty. A few minutes passed, then a few more. "These guys are not that fast," Madison said. "Ask them what they see." I thumbed the radio button. Status. Static hissed, then cleared. "We're hitting a choke point," Tyler said. "Might be a belly crawl. Gary's checking if it opens." His voice sounded slightly different, not the casual confidence from before, tighter. But that made sense. Finding a surprise crawl in an already narrow cave will do that to you. "Want us to come up?" I asked. "Negative yet," he said. "This might dead end. No point in all four of us getting stuck." The transmission clicked off with a little pop. I looked at Madison. She shrugged, but she was chewing the inside of her cheek. Another 10 minutes slid by. The air felt colder, like something in the stone had decided sun was a rumor. Our lights picked out nothing but more walls, the same wet streaks, the same rusty mineral stains. "Ask again," Madison said quietly. "Yo, Pathfinders," I said, forcing a joking tone. "What's the verdict?" This time there was a longer pause before the reply. When it came, it sounded off. "It keeps going," Tyler said. "We think we see some light up ahead. Might be another entrance or a big room, hard to tell. You two should start moving this way, slow, keep right at the fork. Then left at the rock that looks like a... The rest turned to mush under a burst of static. "Like a what?" I asked. No answer. "Say again?" Silence. Madison frowned. "Did he say light? There's no second entrance on the map." "Maybe he meant reflective water," I said, already moving forward. "Or he's just excited." The passage took a hard right, then a low left-hand squeeze. As we shuffled through, the rock muffled the radio more. My next "do you copy" came back as garbled noise, a few syllables floating free. "Here, you keep right ahead." A dim glow appeared around a bend, barely there, like light leaking from another chamber. For a second, my chest loosened. There they are, I thought. They found the room. We rounded the corner and stepped into a void. The glow was not from headlamps. It was the faint spill of our own lights bouncing off a broad chamber's ceiling and vanishing into shadow. The space was huge, easily the largest room we had been in all day. The floor sloped gently down toward a dark pool at the far end. Stalactites dripped from above like slow frozen teeth. There was no sign of Tyler or Gary. "Hello," Madison called, her voice swallowed. Only the drip of water answered. My radio crackled again. A voice seeped through, softer now, like it was coming from another floor of a building. "You guys, this is wild." I could not tell if it was Tyler or Gary. The tone was wrong, too relaxed, too sing-songy, like someone leaving a voicemail in the sun, not crawling through stone. "Where are you?" I said. "We are in a big chamber. There is a pool." Silence. Then, clear and sharp, right in my ear, "We are right behind you." Every muscle in my body seized. I spun around so fast my light skittered across the walls. Madison nearly collided with me. Behind us, the passage we had just come through was empty. No other beams, no shapes, just the narrow throat of rock leading back the way we came. "You heard that, right?" she whispered. "Yeah," I said. My mouth was dry. The radio hissed again, and this time the voice that came through was unmistakable, not from the speaker, but faintly, from the stone around us. A gentle murmur, like someone talking in the next room. "Sky is so bright, man. Feels good." It made no sense. We were under a mountain. The only sky was a memory we had all left behind 2 hours ago. "Tyler," I said, forcing each word. "Stop screwing around. Tell me your last landmark." "What do you see?" For a moment, the static thickened. Then, in a flat, almost dreamy tone that did not sound like any version of him I knew, he said, "Sun on my face." Madison's eyes met mine. "He's not okay," she said. "We're going back," I answered. "Now." We retraced our route, moving faster than was smart. I kept one hand on the wall, the other on the guideline we had been laying as we went. Every few steps, the radio would spit fragments. "Trees," Wind, can you hear me? If I had not known better, I would have thought he was outside, lying in a field, narrating a lazy afternoon. There was no strain in his voice, no sign of panic, just a kind of dazed contentment that felt wrong in my gut. At one junction, the rock played tricks on us. The fork we had taken earlier seemed to have grown a twin. For a few tense seconds, our lights flicked back and forth, both paths looking equally worn, equally plausible. Left, Madison said. We stayed right before. Left will loop us. I hesitated, then trusted her memory over my scrambled sense of direction. We took the left. 20 yards later, my boot hit the familiar scuff where Gary had slipped coming in. Relief flooded me. The closer we got to the entrance passages, the worse the radio got. Not static this time. Words. Don't worry. I see you. The last transmission came when we could already feel the draft from the mouth. Hey, the voice said, soft, almost affectionate. Can you guide me out? It wasn't Tyler. It was not Gary. It was both and neither, and something else braided through, like someone trying on their voices. It was the way your own recording sounds wrong to you, familiar but off. I snapped the radio off. We emerged into gray daylight to find 2 search and rescue trucks and a knot of worried people. Reception at the trailhead had been better than we thought. When we lost contact for longer than planned, a friend at home who was tracking our check-in window called for help. We came out the same place we went in, I told the first responder who reached us. Tyler and Gary went ahead, took a right at a junction. We never saw them again. They went in teams, radios tuned, ropes ready. They followed our markers and their own maps. They found the big chamber with the pool. They found the right-hand junction. They found scuffed patches where multiple sets of boots had passed. They did not find Tyler and Gary. No spare lights. No dropped gear, no torn packs. The only thing they recovered from deeper in the system, wedged in a crack near a tight squeeze, was one of the cheap radios. It was scuffed but intact, battery half full. When they tested it topside, it worked perfectly. The official story, the one in the filed reports, is that the 2 men were likely caught in a collapse or swept into an unmapped shaft, their bodies still somewhere in that maze of stone. Caves swallow people. It happens. The unofficial story, the one Madison and I do not tell many people, is different. In the weeks after, both of us got phantom radio chatter. Not often. Maybe once every few weeks. Always at night. We would be sitting at home, nowhere near the cave, the radio long since turned in as evidence, or so we thought, and a sound would prickle at the edge of hearing. A soft hiss. A click, like someone keying a mic. The first time, I was lying in bed. The noise was so clear I sat up, my heart pounding. Then, from the dark corner of my room, where there was nothing but a pile of laundry and a chair, I heard a voice I knew too well say, "Can you see the exit?" "It is right there." I turned every light on. There was nothing, of course, just my own breathing and the hum of the fridge downstairs. Madison texted me a month later. Does it ever sound like he's talking about sunshine? I stared at the screen a long time before typing back. Yes. We had never told anyone about the sun on my face line. People like neat endings. They want bodies recovered, culprits caught, caves sealed. They want the story to sit still. I cannot give them that. What I have instead are scattered pieces. A cave that ate 2 men without a sound. A radio that spoke of sky from under a mountain. Late-night whispers that feel like they are coming from behind the walls rather than through them. Sometimes I wonder if part of that cave is not space so much as overlap, a place where what is happening under the rock and what could be happening somewhere else bleed together in thin patches. Maybe Tyler and Gary are gone in the simplest, worst way, crushed, drowned, unreachable. Maybe their last thoughts were of open air and sun. Maybe something in that stone liked those thoughts enough to keep replaying them. Either way, when people ask me why I always insist on line of sight in caves now, why I prefer shouting over radios, I just say I do not like talking to things when I cannot see where they are. Because once you have heard a cave answer in a voice that is mostly your friend and partly something else, you realize not every signal you pick up needs a reply. The guide said it as a joke at the start of the tour. If the lights go out, do not run for the exit. Sometimes the cave likes to play with who gets there first. Everyone laughed. I did too. It was a Halloween thing after all. This was one of those spooky specials commercial caves in the Appalachians do every October. They turn most of the overhead lights down, hand out real lanterns instead of letting people rely on phones, and tell a few extra legends along the way. My girlfriend Abigail had gotten tickets weeks in advance. It will be atmospheric, she said. Jump scares without the cheap props. Just rock and darkness. The cave itself was old-school tourist stuff. Big entrance building, gift shop, framed newspaper clippings about when it first opened. The path inside had concrete floors, sturdy handrails, those low stone walls they build so kids will not tumble into pools. It felt safe in the way theme parks feel safe, even when they decorate with plastic skeletons. Our group that night was maybe 20 people, families, couples, a couple of teenagers who were clearly there just to make fun of everything. The guide, a woman in her 40s with a headlamp strapped over her helmet, introduced herself as Carla. Normal rules still apply, she said at the top of the ramp. Stay on the path. No climbing on rocks. No wandering off. This is still a cave. Caves do not care what day it is. She walked us down into the cool, damp air, our lanterns swinging and throwing jittery shadows. The usual formations took on a different character in the low light. Stalactites looked sharper, draperies more like something alive. About halfway through, as we moved into a long tunnel that led toward the exit chamber, Carla stopped beside a sign that said "Last Chance Bathrooms" and turned to face us. This next section, she said, has one way in and one way out. A straight shot. People like that. They think it is simple. But the story we tell down here is about someone, or something, that only ever waits near one place. She pointed her lantern down the tunnel, toward where the air flowed faintly cooler. Right by the exit, she said. The teenagers snickered. A little girl squeezed her dad's hand tighter. Legend, according to Carla, decades ago, during one of these Halloween tours, the group lights failed for a full minute near the end of the route. Total blackout. When they came back on, one person was missing. They found him later, standing just inside the entrance, disoriented and shaking with no idea how he had gotten turned around. He swore he had been walking toward the exit the whole time, feeling a hand on his elbow guiding him deeper. Since then, she said lightly, we tell people, if you ever feel something between you and the door, do not stop. It is just the cave having a little fun. Everyone chuckled again. Easy laughter. It was a story, a mood setter, nothing more. At least that is what I thought. We moved on. The tunnel to the exit chamber sloped gently downward, wide enough for two people to walk side by side. The overhead fixtures were dim, more like nightlights than real illumination. Our lanterns did most of the work. Abigail and I hung near the back, taking our time. She liked to read every plaque, even when they were half lost in shadow. The rest of the group drifted ahead in a loose knot, guided by Carla's bobbing headlamp. We were maybe 100 feet from the final chamber when the lights failed. Not the dramatic, flickering kind of failure you see in movies. No buzzing, no slow fade. Just off. Overhead fixtures, Carla's lamp, everyone's lanterns. 1 second, the tunnel was full of overlapping circles of light. The next, it was perfect black. A couple of people yelped. Someone laughed too loudly, that brittle, I am not scared sound. A child started to whimper. Everyone stay where you are. Carla's voice called from up ahead. Do not move. The backup should kick in a second. Her voice echoed weirdly, bouncing off stone in ways that made it hard to pinpoint her location. The air felt thicker without light. As if darkness had weight, I reached for Abigail without thinking and found her hand immediately. She squeezed back, hard. "You good?" I asked. "Fine," she said, a little too fast. "Just do not let go." Some distant part of my brain ticked off logical explanations: breaker trip, timed shutoff glitch, human error. The rest of me was busy listening. In the heavy silence, I could hear other people breathing. A couple of radios crackling faintly on staff belts, water dripping somewhere far off. And, beneath all that, the steady, whisper-soft sound of footsteps. Not from ahead, where the group had been. From between us, and where I knew the exit chamber had to be. "Carla," someone called. "Is that you walking?" Her answer came, but the acoustics twisted it. "I'm not moving," she said. "Everyone else, stay put." The footsteps kept coming. They were slow, unhurried. The kind of steps you take when you know exactly where the floor is, when the dark is familiar. Not the cautious shuffle of a guest on unfamiliar ground. Abigail's fingers dug deeper into my palm. "Do you hear that?" she breathed. I swallowed. Probably just somebody up front who did not listen. The steps reached the point in the tunnel where, in my memory, the path began to widen toward the exit. They paused there. Then, for a fraction of a second, I felt it. Pressure. Not a solid touch, not like a hand on my chest. More like walking under a low doorway and feeling something brush your hair. A sense of mass in front of us that had not been there before. The air chilled by a few degrees. It did not make sense. We were in the back. There should have been nothing between us and the way out but empty space. Abigail sucked in a sharp breath. "It is right." The light snapped back on. Everything flooded into view at once. The overhead fixtures glowed their dim yellow. Lanterns sputtered back to life. Carla's headlamp flared. People blinked and squinted. And directly in front of us, less than 10 feet away, the tunnel was empty. No person. No object. Just damp rock and the gentle curve leading toward the exit chamber. Except the floor, right at the threshold, the invisible line between tunnel and chamber, was scored with fresh marks. Thin, parallel scratches in the film of dust and mud, all in the same spot, as if something with too many long fingers had been idly dragging them there, again and again. I stared at them. My breath caught somewhere in my throat. Abigail did too. Her face had gone a shade paler under the lantern light. "Did you see?" I started. "Yeah," she said. Yeah. Up ahead, Carla did a quick visual sweep of the group, counting under her breath. "We all good?" she called. "Everybody still with somebody?" People nodded, murmured. No one seemed to be missing. One man near the front, though, was pressed back against the wall just inside the exit chamber, his lantern dangling at his side. His face looked like someone had yanked all the color out of it. "You okay, sir?" Carla asked, walking toward him. He swallowed. His voice came out hoarse. "I thought I saw someone standing right there," he said, pointing to the same scratched patch of floor I had been staring at. "Tall. Wrong. When the lights came back, they were gone." "Probably just your eyes adjusting," one of the teenagers said too loudly, like when you stare at the sun and then look away. The man did not argue, but he would not move away from the wall until his wife took his arm and tugged gently. We filed into the exit chamber. The space was big and domed, with a high ceiling and a wide, gently sloping path that led up toward the final ramp. The air was cooler here, the outside draft stronger. You could almost taste fresh air, even if you could not see the exit yet. Carla gave her usual closing talk. "Thank you for coming. Watch your step. Check out the gift shop on your way out." People relaxed visibly. You could feel that mental shift from "we are underground" to "we are about to be done." As we started up the last incline, Abigail hung back again, her eyes flicking between the tunnel mouth and the far edge of the chamber. "Do you still feel it?" she asked quietly. "Feel what?" She hesitated, then said, "Like something is standing where we just were." watching who leaves, deciding. I wanted to tell her no, to laugh it off as leftover adrenaline, but the truth was, my skin still crawled between my shoulder blades, that animal sense of being observed refusing to shake loose. Maybe it is just the story, I said instead. She primed us to expect something by the exit. Stories do not scratch stone, she said. We got out. The last tunnel narrowed, then widened, and suddenly we were in the bright, overheated air of the visitor center again. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The smell of coffee and cheap plastic replaced the damp mineral of the cave. Kids ran for the candy rack. A mechanical bat flapped pointlessly in one corner. On the surface, it was easy to file those footsteps and that pressure away as nerves. Underground acoustics, imagination playing fill-in-the-blank in total darkness. Except, a week later, scrolling through photos, Abigail stopped suddenly and zoomed in on one. It was a shot she had taken just before the blackout, pointed back down the tunnel for an aesthetic of lanterns and shadows. In the distance, where the passage dipped toward the exit, there was nothing at first glance, just darkness. But as she brightened the image and played with the contrast, something emerged. Not a shape exactly, not enough to draw lines around. More like a density, a slightly darker dark, right where the scratches had been later. Could be artifacting, I said. Phone struggling with low light. Could be, she said. Her finger hovered over the screen. Or it could be the cave. The cave is not a person, Abs. She looked up at me. Maybe not, she said. But it has thresholds, and something about that one felt used. We still go caving, sometimes. Real caves, wild ones with no lights, but the ones we bring ourselves. Those scare me in the straightforward way. Loose rock, tight spaces, the possibility of getting turned around. What happened on that Halloween tour is different. That was a place mapped and lit and walked 1,000 times. A place where the path is supposed to be the safest thing. Now, whenever I see a glow of daylight at the end of any underground passage, I find myself slowing just a fraction as I approach. Not stopping, never stopping, just checking, listening, feeling. Because it is one thing to be afraid of the dark behind you. It is another to realize there might be something that only ever waits by the light.